Chapter 963. After breakfast and watching the morning news, Li Huaqing, who rarely had a leisurely morning, walked through the backyard and came to his office. The buildings in the Hidden Dragon Sea didn't have a specific office space. The 9 directors each had a standalone building that wasn't small. There was a front yard and a backyard. The backyard was the resting area. After passing by a small yard with grapevines, the front yard was the office area. Ma Si, the chief secretary of the president, had come to the office 10 minutes before Li Huaqing came. He cleaned the office, boiled a pot of water, and sorted out yesterday's documents. When everything was done, Li Huaqing, who had a good sense of time, walked in slowly. "President." Ma Si greeted him with a smile. Li Huaqing smiled, handed him a bag of tea, and said softly, "I'm drinking black tea today. It's the taste of home. I miss it." "Okay." Ma Si took the tea. Seeing that the president had no orders, he left quietly. Li Huaqing walked to the desk and saw at a glance a document that Ma Si deliberately put in a conspicuous position. The document was printed with the seal of the Ministry of Security of Jianghu State. It was bright red, which meant that it had a very high priority. Li Huaqing frowned slightly, picked up the document, and glanced through it quickly. He seemed a little surprised, then lowered his head and read it again slowly. Ma Si pushed open the door of the office, walked in with boiling water, and began to make tea. "Is the news confirmed?" Li Huaqing raised the document in his hand and asked softly. A strange color flashed in Ma Si's eyes, and then she nodded. "It's true." Now the whole dark world should have known the news. Li Huaqing was a little speechless. After a few seconds, he laughed and said, "Of course I know it's true, but..." He looked at the seal at the bottom of the document. With this seal, it proved that the news was 100% genuine. But some things, even if they knew it was true, were still unbelievable. "I probably feel the same as the president. I also think it's a little unbelievable. It's just that this thing really happened." Ma Si laughed and said with some emotion, "A mysterious expert challenged Donghuan Li Tianlan. If the opponent is not tired of living, then it can only mean one thing." "Tut," Li Huaqing shook his head. "The dark world is not peaceful again. It has never been peaceful." Ma Si shook her head slightly. Li Huaqing thoughtfully picked up the document and read it again. He suddenly asked, "What do you think about this matter?" Ma Si was at a loss and did not understand what Li Huaqing meant. The special warfare systems of all countries have detailed records of what kind of people and experts there are in the dark world. Under such circumstances, it is unlikely that the so-called supermundane experts will appear. Of course, nothing is absolute in the world. In the past few decades, there have been some invincible realm experts who are out of the sight of all countries, but only occasionally. Moreover, none of them has reached the peak of the invincible realm. The intelligence is very clear. The challengers showed the strength beyond the peak of the invincible realm in an instant. What does this mean? There is already a saying in the dark world that the East Royal world is invincible. Wang Tianzong's whereabouts are unknown. In the current dark world, the combat capability level is very obvious. Li Tianlan can barely be regarded as unique, followed by Li Guangtu and Lin Fengting. Both of them have surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. What about Lin Fengting and Li Guangtu? It is ridiculous that there is no expert at the peak of the invincible realm in the whole dark world. Such a situation is too rare. I believe that the mysterious challenger has the strength beyond the peak of the invincible realm. That is to say, even if the opponent's combat capability is not at the level of Li Tianlan, it should be very close to it. It is probably at the same level as Lin Fengting and Li Guangtu. If such a person has no ambition, then there is no need for him to challenge Li Tianlan. If he has ambition, then where was he before? With his strength, if he wants to develop his power, he has long been a big shot in the dark world. Anyway, such strength can't be obtained overnight, right? He has kept a low profile for so long. Why did he suddenly jump out in front of everyone? He even wants to challenge Li Tianlan, who is known as East Royal. Ma Si handed the brewed black tea to Li Huaqing and casually sat down opposite him. He had been by Li Huaqing's side for nearly 15 years, and the relationship between a secretary and a leader had almost transformed into a familial relationship. Thus, he was not overly reserved most of the time. He gently tapped the black tea in front of him and said thoughtfully, "You mean, it's because of the upcoming decisive battle in the North Sea? The Prime Minister has some partners, such as Wang Qinglei, and even some foreign forces," Li Huaqing said in a low voice. "I don't know if they found Wang Qinglei, and then Wang Qinglei found the Prime Minister, or if the Prime Minister took the initiative to contact them. But the Prime Minister once told me personally that there is an unknown majesty in the dark world." His Majesty. This word had always been a specific title in the dark world. For example, Wang Tianzong used to be. For example, Li Tianlan now. This title basically meant invincibility in the world. Ma Si's face changed slightly. No matter how secretive His Majesty is, he is still His Majesty, and his strength can't be too weak. The Prime Minister can know him, which means that he is also interested in Beihai. It is understandable that East Island is determined to get Beihai, but in the whole incident, the intervention of the Vatican and the Jiang family of South America is obviously driven by someone. If you want to integrate these forces, you really need a fighting force that can control the situation. His Majesty should be him, and it can only be him. If I'm not wrong, he should be the behind-the-scenes manipulator who pushed for the final battle in Beihai. Some of his ideas even affected Wang Qinglei and the Prime Minister. In other words, the Prime Minister was used by him. He is indeed a powerful figure. He challenged Li Tianlan and Tiannan. Ma Si's eyes suddenly flashed. Does this mean that he is attracting attention, and the real layout, the last means, will be used in Beihai? That is to say, the final battle in Beihai is about to begin? You can understand it that way. Li Huaqing frowned. But it is not necessary. It is right to attract attention, but in this case, doesn't His Majesty think it is best to continue to hide in the dark? If a mysterious superior, who is likely to be at the same level or slightly weaker than Li Tianlan, hides in the dark and makes a sneak attack, even Li Tianlan does not dare to be careless. So why does he want to expose himself before the final battle? Is this His Majesty a fool? Ma Si complained in her heart. She chose her words carefully and expressed her personal thoughts. Maybe he thinks there is no need to hide? Or, what he is about to set up in Beihai is more important than his own existence. He is an expert who has surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. What else can be more important than him? Murderous weapons? Ordinary murderous weapons can't even hurt Li Tianlan. More important than him, only. Li Huaqing suddenly paused. Ma Si suddenly came to her senses and said subconsciously, more important than him, only the superior at the same level as him, whose identity is more hidden, and it is impossible for him to appear in Beihai. Li Kuangtu. The next moment, Li Huaqing and Ma Si said a name at the same time. Li Huaqing suddenly frowned, hesitated for a moment, and said in a deep voice, "Help me contact Li Tianlan." Ma Si took out her mobile phone, found the specially marked number, and dialed it directly. The phone was quickly connected. Li Tianlan's calm voice came from the other side of the phone. "Okay, President, this is Li Tianlan." Li Huaqing smiled and went straight to the point. "What do you think of the mysterious superior? He may not be very mysterious, but we really don't have evidence to prove his identity. We just have some guesses. In the final battle in Beihai, the ultimate force that Chen Fangqin can rely on is probably him." I suddenly remembered something. Li Huaqing quietly waited for Li Tianlan to finish, and then slowly said, "There has been no news from the Purgatory of Heaven capital for more than 2 years. I don't know how Li Kuangtu's state is. Tianlan, some things can't be ignored." His tone was very light. But the meaning of the reminder was extremely obvious. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment. He was a little surprised by Li Huaqing's sudden concern, but he was not surprised. Li Huaqing and the academics still remained neutral. They withdrew from the cooperation with the Prince Group, and also did not make any comments on Li Tianlan's approach. Their neutral attitude was obvious. But now even a fool could see that Qin Fangqing's chances of winning were not good. And the academics seemed to be neutral, but for the Prince Group and Qin Fangqing, it was a real betrayal. If Qin Fangqing could win, it was hard to say what would happen to Li Huaqing himself, but the academics would definitely not have a good life. However, Li Huaqing always left some leeway. This neutral attitude was the leeway he left. Even if the Prince Group won in the end, the scale of the academics might shrink, but it would not completely disappear. But even so, it was not what Li Huaqing wanted to see. His heart was more complicated. If Li Tianlan won, it meant that from then on Emperor Dong's palace would be out of control like Beihai. If the Prince Group won, the future of the academics was doomed to be difficult. He thought about it again, and finally could only speak according to the strength of the other party. Li Tianlan was strong, so Li Huaqing put his chips on Li Tianlan. Such a reminder was a complete expression of goodwill. Li Guangtu is now in Beihai. In fact, I just came back from Heaven Capital last night. Li Tianlan said calmly, what is certain is that if the final battle will break out in the near future, then no one in the purgatory of Heaven Capital needs to worry except Li Guangtu. Li Huaqing's heart suddenly shook, and he subconsciously narrowed his eyes. He couldn't understand the meaning of Li Tianlan's words for a while, but the point he wanted to say was not this. Now the most important thing to worry about is Li Guangtu. I don't know how Li Guangtu's current state is, and the mysterious expert who is challenging him is also very strong. At present, it is certain that there are already several Invincible Realm experts involved in the next final battle. If these two people are added, what are the odds of winning? There was no response from the other side of the phone for a long time. Just when Li Huaqing thought that the phone had been hung up, Li Tianlan's voice sounded. Don't worry. His tone was calm with extreme confidence. They can't make any waves. I'm going to have breakfast. He said slowly, goodbye. The phone was hung up directly. Li Huaqing looked at the phone in his hand, lost in thought. The whole dark world was now speculating how strong Li Tianlan was now. But to this day, Li Tianlan's strength was still a mystery. The strength he had shown so far was not enough for others to have a clear judgment of his combat capability. He thought of Li Tianlan's tone. It was a kind of peace and calmness that everything was under control. Did Li Tianlan really have the absolute confidence to overturn the luxurious lineup of two experts who had surpassed the peak of the Invincible Realm and several Invincible Realm experts by himself? If he really had this ability, with such a lineup, did it mean that he could really sweep the entire dark world with his own strength? He might not have reached Wang Tianzong's realm at that time. But the Chosen One was never a realm. If he could do this, Li Tianlan would be the real Chosen One of this era before Wang Tianzong recovered from his injury. Li Huaqing took a deep breath. He picked up the teacup and took a sip of his hometown's black tea. After a long time, he sighed sincerely. The times are really going to change. Just as Ma Si was about to say something, his phone rang again. But it was not the work phone in Li Huaqing's hand that rang, but Li Huaqing's personal phone. Ma Si stood up and wanted to leave. Li Huaqing waved his hand and motioned him to sit down. He took out the phone and glanced at the number. He narrowed his eyes and his expression was a little subtle. He didn't expect to receive this call at all. He didn't know why this call was made at this time. Li Huaqing hesitated for a moment, but still pressed the answer button, but he didn't speak. Okay, President, this is Jiang Shan. On the phone, Jiang Shan's calm voice rang out unhurriedly. Okay. Li Huaqing responded faintly, indifferently. Both sides held the phone and were silent for about 10 seconds. Jiang Shan was the first to laugh. Well, President, I'm reporting to you this time. The work in Beijing is very difficult. Li Huaqing's eyes were deep and a little unfathomable. Did something unexpected happen again? Ma Si finally knew who was on the other side of the phone. He raised his head in surprise and glanced at Li Huaqing. No. Jiang Shan chuckled and said, Beijing is still stable now. The chaos 2 days ago has caused a lot of pressure on everyone. Today, I'm mainly reporting this matter. At present, Beijiang has preliminarily counted the number of the families of the deceased, and the first batch of pensions was issued yesterday. Today, the second batch of pensions will also be issued. This money can be guaranteed to fall into the hands of every family member. The total amount is more than 400 billion, and it will probably be distributed tomorrow afternoon. More than 400 billion. Li Huaqing's body shook. He had expected this amount, but he didn't expect Jiang Shan to take out the money so quickly. It was impossible for the entire Beijiang to have 400 billion now. Li Huaqing's expression suddenly became serious. When Jiang Shan dealt with the world in Beijiang, the Hidden Dragon Sea was in a meeting. Several directors almost watched the whole process of Jiang Shan's handling, as well as his promises and speeches afterward. 2 days had passed since the incident. Among the 9 directors, 2 had made public comments on the matter. Chen Fengqing directly evaluated Jiang Shan's behavior as a thief of the state. Dongxing Wudi's words were equally fierce, and he used the word wolf's ambition as an evaluation. Jiang Shan's various behaviors showed that he wanted to take Beijiang as his own and turn the land of more than 1 million square kilometers in Zhongzhou state into the Jiang family's own base and headquarters. He did so and expressed so, but after all, he didn't say it clearly. Jiang Shan was a very mature guy. He didn't say it clearly, but it seemed to be a buffer between him and Zhongzhou state. Li Huaqing also tacitly did not give any orders to Beijiang. Now Zhongzhou state was obviously in troubled times. The final battle in Beihai was the highlight, but in the end, it was just the beginning. The general election was coming, and there were all kinds of things to deal with. Everyone planned to deal with the problems in Beijiang after the general election. But now, Jiang Shan directly called him and talked about the current situation in Beijiang very straightforwardly. Li Huaqing was at a loss for a moment. What was he going to do? The finance of Beijiang couldn't come up with more than 400 billion yuan. But Jiang Shan got the money now. The major consortiums in Zhongzhou state were very stable and had a normal relationship with the Jiang family, so the money could only come from foreign forces. Jiang Shan's report could be said to be arrogant and a little brazen. Did he want to lay his cards on the table only 2 days after the incident? Li Huaqing's serious expression became extremely cold little by little. There was still a buffer for some things to be done. But if he blatantly laid his cards on the table and wanted to publicize it, he would be courting death. At this moment, Li Huaqing directly made up his mind. If Jiang Shan really thought that he wanted to take down Beijiang blatantly because he had turned to foreign forces, then he would inevitably react. At all costs, he would react most violently. This was the bottom line that could not be violated. If Jiang Shan dared to touch him, Li Huaqing would let him die. Where does the money come from? Foreign forces? Skull and Bones Society? Elite Club? Or World Financial Union? The 3 forces he mentioned were the world's top super consortiums, and they were also the forces that had the ambition and courage to plot Beijiang. Behind the elite clubs stood the major European giants, and the main leader was the Rothschild family. But with King Tong and Paul's serious injuries, Rothschild's position as the leader was also in jeopardy. All the giants now had other ideas. Behind the Skull and Bones Society was Star State and the whole of America. They were equally powerful. With the support of Star State, they were even more domineering than the elite clubs in many cases. The World Financial Union was a relatively loose organization, but it also had a very special factor. Its headquarters was located in Arad, and it was backed by countless energy and money. Although it was loose, it could also unite sometimes. The elite clubs of Europe, the Skull and Bones Society of Star State, the World Financial Union of Arad, and the Wang family of Beihai and the Flourishing Age Fund of Zhongzhou State were almost the 5 giants of the world financial world. In the field of wealth, they were completely equivalent to the super forces in the dark world. The Flourishing Age Fund wanted to take over Beijiang, but Li Tianlan was 1 step ahead. The Wang family of Beihai had no time to care about other things. Then the answer was obvious to Li Huaqing. There were only 3 organizations left. Li Huaqing's voice was very light and indifferent, without the slightest sharpness and determination. But Jiang Shan heard an unparalleled sense of danger in it. He was almost sure that if he really had these foreign forces behind him, and if he really dared to admit it, then in less than an hour, he would face the fiercest action of Zhongzhou state. Li Huaqing was gentle, but it did not mean that he really had no temper. As the president, he could not be indifferent to this kind of theft. Jiang Shan's mind was in a mess. The smile and his tone gradually disappeared, and he became serious and solemn. President, whether I believe it or not, I can guarantee in the name of the parliament and Beijiang that I did not commit treason. His voice was clear and strong, with great weight. Oh. Li Huaqing gave a noncommittal response. Come to Beijiang, President. Jiang Shan suddenly said, come to Beijiang and have a look. There are no foreign forces here. It is still the territory of Zhongzhou state. The situation here is gradually stabilizing. There is only the Jiang family here. If you still believe me, if the parliament still trusts Beijiang, then, come and have a look. Li Huaqing was silent for about 2 or 3 seconds. Then he raised his hand to look at the time and said indifferently, I will have lunch in Beijiang at noon. Jiang Shan laughed and said, I will go to the airport to meet the president later. Li Huaqing hung up the phone, narrowed his eyes, and seemed to be thinking. President Ma Si, who looked a little pale, hesitated and couldn't help but say, I don't recommend going to Beijiang. Li Huaqing came back from his contemplation, glanced at Ma Si, and asked, why? The Jiang family's position is unclear now. Jiang Shan hides too deeply and is astute. In fact, we don't know enough about the Jiang family and Jiang Shan. If he really turns to foreign forces, you may encounter some unexpected special situations when you go to Beijiang, and you may be in danger. Ma Si said quickly, of course, I understand your feelings. You are worried about the situation in Beijiang. I can go there on behalf of the president, see the situation there, and report to you as soon as possible. Why bother? Li Huaqing shook his head and stood up. Go with me. I am the president of Zhongzhou state. Beijiang is the Beijiang of Zhongzhou state. In our own country, I can go anywhere I want. His voice was low and calm, as if with great majesty. Jiang Shan dares to invite me over, then I will go. I must go. When she gradually woke up from the deepest level of meditation, the cry of the baby next to her ears gradually became clear. She opened her eyes. There was a soft and faint light in her sight. A still graceful and even beautiful figure in pajamas leaned against the other side of the bed, holding a baby and carefully comforting him. Her eyes were a little dazed, and the bright electric light flickered slightly in her pupils. After about half a minute, she came to her senses, turned around subconsciously, and whispered, Mom, let me do it. Tutu, Mom is here. The baby, who was less than 2 years old, had been weaned. She took the baby and kissed him gently on the face. The crying baby seemed to feel his mother's breath, and he became quiet. He grabbed his mother's arm with his little hand, hummed softly, and slowly fell asleep again. She waited for a while, carefully put the baby on the bed, and smiled apologetically at the woman beside her. Tutu usually sleeps very well. I thought he wouldn't wake up. You don't have to work so hard, do you? Summer Solstice looked at her helplessly. In the faint light, her eyebrows and eyes were extremely soft. Song Si gently stroked her son's sleeping face, and her eyes were gentle and firm. This was her son. Her and Wang Xingxiao's son. The name Haotian was given by Wang Xingxiao. The nickname Tutu was given by Song Si. In the 2 years since she left Beihai, from the pregnancy to the birth of the child, the little guy in front of her seemed to have become all her hope. In silence, Song Si pursed her lips and whispered, I can feel that I'm very, very close to the breakthrough. I know that, but I can feel that I'm very close to the breakthrough. Summer Solstice reached out and touched Song Si's hair, whispering, but in fact, there's still a long way to go before the real breakthrough. Song Si's expression didn't change, and she whispered, that's why you have to work harder. Her talent in martial arts was extremely outstanding even in Beihai. Excellent talent could enable her to enter the thunder-shocking realm without any bottlenecks or obstacles. But if it was so easy to break through to the invincible realm, how could this realm be worthy of the word invincible? Xianxia had already been at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm 2 years ago. Pregnancy and childbirth might make her a little haggard, but it wouldn't make her state decline. She had been at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm for several years, but she couldn't find the threshold to break through the thunder-shocking realm and enter the half-step invincible realm. As Xianxia said, she could feel that she was very close to the breakthrough, but she still had no clue. The peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Such a realm was naturally useful in the current situation faced by Beihai, but it could also be said that it didn't have much effect. Don't think too much, Summer Solstice sighed softly, I've been through it. In martial arts, sometimes it's more effective to let nature take its course than to rush for quick results. I'm a little tired these days. I need to take a rest and let myself relax completely. Maybe it'll be easier for me to break through. Xianxia lowered her head, looked at her son, and was silent for a long time. Mom, she called very naturally and whispered, I miss home, and I miss him, and I want to help him. Her head seemed to be lower, and she said in a weak voice, it's very dangerous for him to stay in Mount Dibbing, isn't it? Don't let your imagination run wild. Our alliance with Emperor Dong's palace is very stable at this stage. Li Tianlan is very strong now, and we're not weak. If we join hands with Emperor Dong's palace, there won't be any danger. Summer Solstice laughed. Strictly speaking, the place where they were now did not belong to any country. It was a private island in the Pacific Ocean, a secret industry of the Wang family of Beihai. The island was not big, but the facilities were relatively complete. In addition to hundreds of servants and logistics personnel with different duties, there were only Summer Solstice, Tangshi, Xianxia, and the newly born Haotian. Different important figures of the Wang family of Beihai were all placed in different areas. More than 2 years was not a long time, and there was no change between the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Summer Solstice spent most of her time recuperating. Tangshi still controlled the business empire of the Wang family of Beihai, remotely commanding and dealing with endless things every day, and Xianxia took care of the baby. Perhaps because she had been away from Beihai for too long, Xianxia, who had given birth, began to suffer from frequent insomnia and became more and more anxious. With her willpower, it was naturally impossible for her to suffer from postpartum depression, but the fluctuation of her mood had a great impact on her. So she began to meditate and practice kendo for a long time. In order to take care of her grandson, Summer Solstice lived with Xianxia and taught her martial arts. The two made an agreement not long ago after the baby was weaned. If the stalemate continued, then after Xianxia broke through the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and became a half-step invincible realm expert, she could leave here and return to Wang Xingxiao to help him. But, Summer Solstice glanced at Xianxia with a somewhat complicated look in her eyes. It'll be fine. She said softly, in order to let him concentrate, I haven't told the outside world. The current situation is actually very good. Xingxiao is very well prepared. If there are no accidents, we should be able to return to Beihai soon. Really? Xianxia raised her head and looked at Summer Solstice in a daze. She was already a woman, and her appearance was still gorgeous and delicate, but there was a touch of exhaustion and haggardness that could not be concealed. Yes. It's true. Summer Solstice held Xiaoxi's hand and said with a soft smile, it's impossible for Beihai to lose. Or to put it bluntly, when those people set the final battlefield in Beihai province, they can't win. To say the least, even if Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace don't participate in the final battle this time, Xingxiao will be fine, and Beihai will be fine. So, don't worry. Xianxia nodded hard, looked at Summer Solstice, and said seriously, I believe you. Her face and eyes looked pure and flawless in the faint light, with a kind of piety that was enough to move people. Summer Solstice laughed. At this moment, she suddenly thought of the time when she was in Mount Dibbing. She thought of the night when her injury suddenly completely recovered. She thought of the world-shaking sword that split the sky of Beihai and split the entire Mount Dibbing. The heavenly sun that should not appear in this era. Invincible in the world. That was the real king of the world. That day. The moment he stood on Mount Dibbing, he called out the names of Song Xiai and Haotian. From that moment on, she knew the ending of the Wang family of Beihai in another era, or in the story that Lin Fengting and Qin Weibai once told. Because the man who called himself Li Dongqing did not call out Wang Tianzong, Wang Xingxiao, or Summer Solstice. They might have died long ago. When most people had died, only Song Xiai and Haotian, who was still growing, could support the Wang family of Beihai. Song Xi's talent was very good, but in fact, there was a limit. According to Summer Solstice's judgment, she might be able to break through and enter the invincible realm, but she basically had no potential to reach the peak of the invincible realm. How could she fight against Li Dongqing and the Sword Dynasty that did not exist in that story? There seemed to be only one answer. She merged with Worryless and turned herself into a half-human and half-metal monster. Summer Solstice could not imagine what kind of despair and madness it was. But after knowing the possible ending, looking at her daughter-in-law who had given birth to the eldest son and grandson of the Wang family of Beihai, she completely loved and doted on her from the bottom of her heart. At least in this era, she would try her best to change that tragic and cold ending. Song Xiai hesitated. Her voice was cautious. How long will it take us to go back to Beihai? This was the question she had always wanted to ask but had never really asked. The place that she thought about day and night had a person that she missed dearly. After being away for so long, she missed him so much. Summer Solstice looked at her with a smile and said softly, "It won't be more than a month at the latest." When dawn broke, there was another heavy snow in the sacred state of Beihai. The white snow fell from the sky silently. The whole Mount Dibbing quickly became silver. Wang Xingxiao stood quietly on the stage of formidable person, looking at Beihai that was still slowly turbulent in the distance. There was no sword light or sword energy in the depths of Beihai. The wind was calm, and the snow fell. He wore a coat and held a thermos cup in his hand. He unscrewed the lid and took a sip of tea. Wang Xingxiao laughed. "The weather is good." Xian Ming stood beside Wang Xingxiao and smiled. He whispered, "The average temperature of Beihai this year is 1.5 degrees lower than in previous years. It's still a little cold. I like this kind of weather." Wang Xingxiao nodded and said slowly, "It can make people more clear-headed." Xian Ming kept his smile and said nothing. "Is there any result?" Wang Xingxiao suddenly asked. The matter of the mysterious expert challenging Emperor Dong Huang was still fermenting. The whole dark world had been completely boiling overnight. Beihai had exchanged a lot of information with Emperor Dong Huang's palace as soon as they got the news and tried to identify the opponent. This task naturally fell on Xian Ming. No. Xian Ming was a little helpless. There are too few experts at this level. Whether now or in the past, there are only a few of them. Lin Fengting and Li Guangtu can be ruled out. The former will not challenge Li Tianlan, and the latter will not do such a thing. And they practice swordsmanship. There is sufficient evidence that the mysterious expert who challenged Li Tianlan mainly practices the domain. Neither Lin Fengting nor Li Guangtu is suitable. Domain, Wang Xingxiao narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself. Xian Ming looked even more helpless. For hundreds of years, the dark world had always been dominated by swordsmanship. Although the domain was also a way of martial arts, and it was a way to directly enter the invincible realm, for hundreds of years, the real pinnacle of force in the dark world had always been swordsmanship. Experts who had entered the invincible realm in the research field had been emerging, but there were very few who could really reach the peak of the invincible realm. Shortening the time range, in the past 50 years, the experts at the peak of the invincible realm in swordsmanship included the two patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai, the two patriarchs of the Lin clan, Li Honghe and Li Guangtu of the Li family, and Li Shi. These names represented the peak of the invincible realm, and they were all martial arts giants in the field of swordsmanship. And there seemed to be only one expert who had reached the peak of the invincible realm in the field of domain in the past 100 years. Saint War Angel Arcis, who had died in the hands of tribulation. But Arsis was not an absolute expert at the peak of the invincible realm. Even when Wang Tianzong had not broken through to the peak of the invincible realm, Arsis in the state of coronation was a little worse than Wang Tianzong. As for the others, Gu Xingyan, Jiang Qiansong, the patriarch of Rothschild, Paul, at best, they were only close to the peak of the invincible realm. Before the invincible realm, there was no advantage or disadvantage between swordsmanship and domain. But after the invincible realm, it was an almost irrefutable fact that swordsmanship was superior to domain. But now, a mysterious expert who had directly broken through to the peak of the invincible realm in the field of domains suddenly appeared, and he even dared to challenge Li Tianlan, who was vaguely the top expert in the dark world. When the major forces got the news, they all felt that their worldviews were shattered. After the shock and astonishment, they were confused. Because such a person seemed to come out of nowhere. In everyone's knowledge, there was no expert who could reach the peak of the invincible realm in the field of domain at present. Then where did this expert who had surpassed the peak of the invincible realm come from at this time? Is there no clue at all? Wang Xingxiao asked. No. Xian Ming smiled bitterly. According to our intelligence, such a person shouldn't exist at all. At present, the only scientific explanation is that he has been secretly strengthening his strength. Even when he reached the peak of the invincible realm, he didn't expose himself until he broke through to the peak of the invincible realm and approached the supreme realm. That's the only explanation, but it's also, he hesitated. But it's also the most nonsensical explanation. Wang Xingxiao added with a smile. Xian Ming nodded with a bitter smile. That's true. If there is such a person, I can't imagine how wretched he will be. Even an expert at the peak of the invincible realm doesn't dare to enter the secular world. How can such a person break through to the peak of the invincible realm? Wang Xingxiao looked at the sea in the distance in silence and didn't speak. Xian Ming hesitated and wanted to say something. Say what you want to say. It doesn't matter if you're wrong. Wang Xingxiao said blandly. I think, Xian Ming frowned, hesitated for a moment, and said softly, when exchanging intelligence with Emperor Dong's palace, it was military counselor who contacted me. His tone was a little hesitant. I feel that military counselor seems to know something, but he didn't say it. Of course, this is just my intuition. There is no evidence. Wang Xingxiao drank some water again. After a long time, he said in a low voice, it's understandable. At least in this matter, if military counselor really knows something but doesn't tell us, it means that they are not honest enough with us. Xian Ming said softly. There's no need to worry about this. Wang Xingxiao coughed and laughed. We also don't tell Emperor Dong's palace something. Cooperation is just cooperation. And it can be foreseen that after the final battle, the situation in Zhongzhou state will be in a new balance. Our cooperation with Emperor Dong's palace will also end at that time. At that time, we may become opponents fighting for interests. It's normal for them to hold back from us. But I don't understand, Xian Ming said with some doubts, that's the enemy of Emperor Dong's palace. At least we are still cooperating. Why does Emperor Dong's palace hide the enemy's intelligence from us as partners? It doesn't make sense. If I were military counselor, if I knew something, would certainly not hold back in this regard. Instead, I would rely on the strength of my allies. Maybe, Wang Xingxiao's smile was a little strange. Maybe he thinks that Beihai is no longer capable of participating in this kind of thing, or, Xian Ming lowered his head and did not speak. It's clear, isn't it? Wang Xingxiao said quietly. Xian Ming's face suddenly became ugly. The challenger was the enemy of Emperor Dong's palace. Beihai didn't belong to Emperor Dong's palace. Military counselor knew something, but he hid his enemy's intelligence from Beihai. Of course, this was not the way to protect one's enemy. Then there was only one possible explanation. The opponent was not only the enemy of Emperor Dong's palace, but also the enemy of the Wang family of Beihai. Hiding the opponent's intelligence might become the intelligence advantage of Emperor Dong's palace and Beihai after the end of the cooperation. Even further, Emperor Dong's palace hoped to hide this person's intelligence so that he could cause enough trouble for Beihai in the final battle of Beihai. Everyone knew very well. The reason why Li Tianlan participated in the final battle of Beihai was not that he had any good feelings for Beihai, but that the two highly similar organizations instinctively banded together after encountering a problem. It was impossible for Emperor Dong's palace not to understand the principle of interdependence. What was more, the result of the final battle of Beihai was directly related to the future layout of Emperor Dong's palace. From this point of view, if one wanted to put it bluntly, that was, in the final battle, Li Tianlan hoped that he could win. As for how much loss Beihai would suffer, it was not a problem he cared about at all. As long as Beihai still existed after the battle. Emperor Dong's palace, Xian Ming gritted his teeth. His evil intentions should be punished. We are allies, but also opponents. Wang Xingxiao's tone was calm and a little cold. Then Xian Ming glanced at Wang Xingxiao. It's okay. Wang Xingxiao laughed. Continue to investigate. It would be best if you can find out, but it doesn't matter if you can't. I will wait for them on Mount Dibbing. With hundreds of years of history, Beihai has proved one thing countless times. No matter what situation it is in, no matter what it encounters, Beihai can't be afraid of any enemy. Xian Ming was speechless. I remember a saying. Wang Xingxiao's voice was absent-minded. It's a famous saying from my great-grandfather. Xian Ming was stunned for a moment, and then he understood. Wang Xingxiao's great-grandfather was the grandfather of Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong. Before Wang Xingxiao, before Wang Tianzong, and before the old patriarch of Beihai. He was the #1 person on the divine list in the dark world in that era. He was also the most famous tyrant among the patriarchs of Beihai. At his peak, he once stood on the stage of Formidable Person and said a famous saying that was still circulating in the dark world. I'm standing here. As far as I can see, those who refuse to surrender should be destroyed. Wang Xingxiao muttered to himself and whispered, if you leave Beihai for a long time, will you miss it here? Xian Ming seemed to be still immersed in that sentence. Hearing that, he was stunned for a moment and whispered, yes. His voice was very soft, but it was extremely firm. I think all of us will. Wang Xingxiao laughed. I miss the bright moon in Beihai and the snow in Xingzhou. His voice was so soft as if he was sleep-talking. Xian Ming, he asked slowly, have you ever seen the breath of the sea? Chapter 964. The grand and somewhat spacious hall was filled with dense darkness. The faint light flickered and shone in every corner. Darkness was like the main melody, bringing thick shadows one after another in the hall. The surrounding tall walls and pillars were engraved with dark style reliefs. In the dim light, they looked especially gloomy and strange. At the end of the hall was a platform with steps piled up. The platform was not very big, but it was high enough. The platform faced the main door, and the scarlet-red carpet extended all the way to the outside of the door. On both sides of the carpet, ancient and awe-inspiring armors, swords, and spears were placed every 10 meters. They were majestic, like guards, silently and resolutely guarding the hall. In the light and careful footsteps, he lowered his head and walked into the door of the hall with some fear but no hesitation. The dim light shone on his body, and the white suit on his body was illuminated with a faint blood color against the carpet. The handsome face that was completely taut because of nervousness seemed a little distorted in the dim light. He lowered his head and bent down, respectfully holding a box with both hands. He passed by one armor after another, and finally stopped in front of the scarlet carpet on the steps. He hesitated for a moment and did not choose to step on the steps. Instead, he bent down deeply in front of the steps and raised the square box that was not too big with both hands. On the platform above the steps, a cold female voice sounded, "Come up." The light in the hall was dim, and the highest platform was completely dark, without any light, as if it could devour everything. He held the box, his body trembled slightly. He gritted his teeth and carefully stepped on the steps. 13 steps. What an unlucky number. He thought silently, staring at the steps and carpet under his feet from beginning to end, and did not look up. The female voice in the darkness did not sound again. So he braced himself and walked forward. Stepping on the steps and walking forward for about 10 meters, he saw an extremely old bronze table. The pattern on the long metal table was blurred because of the lack of light. Behind the long table, a woman sat quietly on a long black chair. She could not see her figure, her face, her expression, and her age clearly. She could not see anything clearly. She was like the deepest darkness, quiet and soundless. His head was still lowered. From his point of view, he could only vaguely see a pair of fair and slender legs in the darkness. She only glanced at it unintentionally, and then lowered her head in fear. She maintained her posture of bending over, and once again raised the box in her hand. "What is it?" The emotionless female voice rang out in the darkness. "This is my gift to you." He maintained a humble posture as if he could crawl on the carpet at any time. The box was placed on the long bronze table. In the darkness, a slender yet excessively pale hand reached out and opened the box. He bowed his head and said nothing. There was a sudden silence in the darkness for a few seconds. "Milos?" There was no reaction of surprise. Instead, the female voice spoke with some astonishment. "Milos Pong Edwards. Code name Death Penalty, the top expert of the half-step invincible realm, the chief executioner of the Jianghu family of South America. He was the closest person to the real invincible realm in the dark world. He was like Jianghu before the breakthrough, saint before the breakthrough, firmament of the Wang family of Beihai, military counselor of Emperor Dong's palace. Milos's strength was great. In the state of full outbreak, he could almost fight against an ordinary invincible realm expert in a short time. This state would not last long, about 20 seconds, but it was enough to make him one of the most dangerous people under the invincible realm in the dark world. And now, Milos, the chief executioner of the Jianghu family of South America with the code name Death Penalty, Jiang Guochu's right-hand man, and in charge of all things of the Jianghu family of South America in Europe, was now in the box. There was some blood in the box. Milos's face was treated and looked clean and clear. This was a head. Milos's head. "Yes, I heard that he offended you verbally some time ago, so I think you will like this gift. Milos is planning a big action against the Dark Knights recently. He didn't say it clearly, but it should be aimed at all the peripheral forces of the Dark Knights in Europe. He also invited me, so he is here now." The woman in the darkness was silent for a while. "Very good," she said indifferently, "I like this gift very much. What's your name?" "Randa." "Your Highness, my name is Randa. I have a second gift for you. That is myself and more than 70% of the assassin's strength." The assassin. It sounded like a small, unfashionable organization. But in fact, it was the invincible realm force in the dark world. It could even be said to be the youngest invincible realm force in the dark world today, much younger than Emperor Dong's palace. They had only developed for about a few years. Many things had just taken shape, or even not. Speaking of foundation, they naturally didn't have it. In terms of scale, it was not a superpower. In terms of scale, it was not a superpower. Everything was still developing. But now, they had no chance to continue to develop. The most important reason was that the leader of the invincible realm of the assassin died a few days ago. In Zhongzhou State, in Huading, he was killed by Dong Huang in one move. The assassin was a force of Zhu. If Zhu was still alive, they should still be working with the Jiang family of South America, the Holy Land, East Island, and His Majesty to prepare for the next decisive battle in Beihai. But with Zhu's death, the atmosphere inside the assassins suddenly changed completely. Their force had just started. Without Zhu, it would be difficult for them to protect themselves, let alone participate in the game at the level of Dong Huang and His Majesty. No matter how young the assassins were, they were still a force with invincible realm experts. When they lost their invincible realm experts and had not gained a firm foothold, there were too many people who wanted to devour them completely. Even in the eyes of the superpowers, the assassin had no foundation. The seemingly dry structure was not worthless. It also meant a huge force. Decisive battle? As soon as the news of Ju's death spread inside the assassin, all the higher-ups in the assassin almost gave up the idea at the same time. They didn't even think about revenge for Ju at all. They didn't discuss it at all. Revenge for Ju? This was a complete joke inside the assassin. They didn't even dare to think about it, let alone do it. What they wanted to do most now was to protect themselves. So they refused some of the action requests put forward by the Jiang family of South America without hesitation. When Milos, the chief executioner of the Jiang family of South America, personally came to order them, there was almost no hesitation. The assassin became a real assassin on the spot. More than 10 senior assassins used various means to besiege him at all costs. After more than an hour of entanglement, they finally killed Milos, whose code name was Death Penalty. Then Randa, the strongest person inside the assassin, carried Milos' head and went directly to the headquarters of the Dark Knights to meet the Dark Queen of the Dark Knights. The Dark Queen was the new master of the Dark Knights. After the chaos in Snow Country, Raphael, the commander of the Dark Knights, had not been able to recover from his injury for more than 2 years. As soon as the Dark Queen appeared in Europe, she naturally took over the supreme power of the Dark Knights from Raphael. To this day, there were still many forces in the Dark World who didn't know the origin of the Dark Queen. If she hadn't shown the strength that was very close to the peak of the Invincible Realm, many forces would have even regarded her as the new Invincible Realm expert in the Dark World. But the identity of the Dark Queen was no longer a secret in front of the real superpowers. The Samsara Palace's position was the most vague and deeply hidden strongest supermaster, the lover of Raphael, the commander of the Dark Knights. Sometimes she was the master of Samsara Palace, but most of the time she was Qin Weibai's personal bodyguard. Samsara Palace, Flaming Fire. The Samsara Palace had now been destroyed. With the last and most important main body, the Flourishing Age Fund, merged into Emperor Dong's palace, there was no trace of the Samsara Palace in the Dark World. Flaming Fire became the Dark Queen and controlled the Dark Knights. She became gloomier, more closed, and more indifferent than when she was in the Samsara Palace. She had only been in charge of the Dark Knights for a little more than a year, but in such a short period of time, she had personally carved countless eye-catching traces in the seemingly calm Europe, which was actually turbulent. At least in the land of Europe, her reputation had almost completely overshadowed that of the Queen of Shadows, King Tong, in her heyday. The Queen in the Dark was silent. She seemed to be thinking. Among the assassins, Randa, whose code name was Dark Blade, was an expert who was very close to the half-step Invincible Realm. But at such a close distance, with the Queen's silence, he couldn't feel the existence of the other party at all in the dark. Dark Blade's heart was a little cold, and his body bent more obviously. He was not only an expert who was close to the half-step Invincible Realm. He was also an assassin who was good at restraining his breath, hiding, and perception, and was close to the half-step Invincible Realm. But now, separated by a long bronze table, if he didn't look at the pair of beautiful long legs in the dark, he couldn't feel the existence of the other party at all. Like clouds and mist, it was an extremely illusory feeling. This feeling made Randa tremble from the bottom of his heart. This illusory feeling seemed to fully explain one thing. If the other party didn't control the Dark Knights but became an assassin, she could definitely become the most terrifying assassin of the Invincible Realm in this era. Do you mean that the assassins are willing to submit to the Dark Knights? After a long silence, the Queen's light and emotionless voice sounded again. No, not to submit to the Dark Knights, but to you. The assassins are willing to be the sharp blade and loyal dog in your hands. If your will is for us to join the Dark Knights, we have no objection. But we still hope that we can have our own organization. Randa's voice was respectful and humble. Randa's voice was respectful and humble. Tell me your reasons. There seemed to be a touch of curiosity in the Queen's voice. Randa hesitated for a moment and finally decided to tell the truth. The assassins were promoted to a very high position, but they fell down. If the assassins want to survive, they can only rely on the real strong. You have many choices. The queen said calmly, the Dark Knights are not the best. In fact, we don't have many choices, Randa smiled bitterly. In this case, whether we go to the sanctuary, the Jiang family of South America, or East Island, the other party will regard us as cannon fodder in the final battle in Beihai. Our death is even worthless, because from the beginning to the end, a considerable number of assassins think that the final battle in Beihai is meaningless to the assassins. Now that Zhu has fallen, we have no reason to go to Beihai to fight. We don't want to go to Beihai, which is empty now. Beihai is too chaotic now. And even if we are willing to join Beihai, I'm afraid Wang Xingxiao won't trust us easily. Emperor Dong's palace is a good choice, but His Majesty East Emperor has just killed Zhu. We don't dare to think about his attitude toward the assassins. Kunlun City is on the verge of collapse. It's also not our choice. Randa's smile was extremely bitter. So, the Dark Knights is our best, or even our only choice. Similarly, you used to be the super master of Samsara Palace. If we go to your side, even if His Majesty East Emperor will vent his anger on us because of Zhu, we won't see His Majesty's sword light under your command. His Majesty East Emperor, the Queen laughed. Her emotions grew stronger and stronger, and she became extremely sarcastic. What does East Emperor have to do with me? Just because I used to be the super master of Samsara Palace? Once. Randa lowered his head and said nothing. Why did flaming fire become the Dark Queen? It had always been a strange thing in the dark world. It seemed that the Queen and Emperor Dong's palace had no connection, but the cooperation between the two sides in Wulan State had never been broken. Excluding the Flourishing Age Fund, the interests of Wulan State could now be said to be the main source of income for Emperor Dong's palace. After the chaos in Snow Country, Emperor Dong almost did whatever he wanted in Wulan State and occupied the biggest interests. After Emperor Dong's palace, the Dark Knights occupied the biggest interests in Wulan State. The cooperation between the two sides was extremely close in this regard. Even if the Dark Knights had robbed several interests that should have belonged to Emperor Dong's palace in the past 2 years, Emperor Dong did not say anything. After Emperor Dong returned to Tiannan, he also did not express any opinion about it. The outside world naturally could not figure out the relationship between the Queen and Emperor Dong, but one thing was certain. Randa firmly believed that joining the Dark Knights was the best choice and the best way to avoid Emperor Dong's anger in the future. His potential was limited and he had no hope of breaking through, but he was very clear about how to be a subordinate. Most of the time, when listening to a leader's speech, in fact, it was not necessary to listen to what he said. The most important thing was to listen to what he did not say. The Queen's words were what made him feel that he had made the right choice. In the darkness, the Queen seemed to be thinking about something quietly. After a few minutes, she slowly said, "How many assassins are there now?" At present, there are 3 experts in the Thunder-Shocking Realm. In addition to me, there is one at the peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm, and one in the Thunder-Shocking Realm. There are 60 people in the Fire-Flaming Realm. Among them, 20 are at the peak of the Fire-Flaming Realm. There are about 6,000 combatants scattered in various places. Detailed assets have not been calculated yet. Randa said seriously. You turn to me because you don't want to participate in the decisive battle in Beihai. The Queen's gaze fell on him from the darkness. Then what can you do for me if you surrender to me? No. Randa shook his head and said respectfully, we just don't want to participate in the decisive battle in Beihai as cannon fodder. For assassins, what we need most now is to slowly develop and accumulate strength, so we think that the decisive battle in Beihai is meaningless to us. But if the Queen asks us to participate, we won't hesitate. Your meaning is our meaning. Ha, the Queen chuckled softly. Go to Annie. She said slowly, he will arrange your position. Annie was her personal bodyguard. Strictly speaking, she did not belong to the Dark Knights. Since the assassins turned to her, the arrangement of the assassins naturally had to be handed over to Annie, not to the higher-ups of the Dark Knights. Randa nodded and bowed deeply to the Queen in the darkness. Little by little, he walked backward down the steps and slowly walked out of the dark hall of the Dark Knights. The queen sat on the dark platform and watched his figure slowly disappear, leaving the hall completely. She took a deep breath and suddenly coughed violently. Puff! A mouthful of blood spurted from her mouth and fell on the long bronze table and the bright red carpet in front of her. She was short of breath and curled up slightly. She looked extremely painful. In the darkness, there was a weak and pale face. Chapter 965. The severe pain lasted for a long time before it slowly subsided. On the platform where there was almost no light, the queen slowly straightened her body, and her breath had become extremely weak. There was silence in the dark hall. The armors on both sides of the carpet stood silently. In the box on the long table, Milos had opened his eyes and looked at her quietly. The queen took a few deep breaths, wiped the blood from the corners of her mouth and the cold sweat on her forehead, and raised her head gently. The extremely illusory sword energy quietly covered Milos' head. The cold flesh and blood were quickly worn down and melted under the sword energy, and finally disappeared. She really liked the gift that the assassin had given her. The Dark Knights and the Jianghu family of South America had a very fierce conflict half a month ago. When all the forces in Europe received the news, the Queen of Dark took action in person, and Milos and another superior of the half-step invincible realm went all out. The battle was fierce and short. It lasted for dozens of seconds. Milos and another superior of the half-step invincible realm escaped with injuries. The Queen of Dark was unharmed. Such a record was naturally extremely powerful in the eyes of others who didn't know the details of the Queen. After all, Milos could be comparable to an ordinary superior of the invincible realm in a short time when he broke out with all his strength. The Queen could injure him and another superior of the half-step invincible realm, which meant that her strength was at least beyond the ordinary invincible realm. But in the eyes of the superpowers who knew that she was flaming fire, they could clearly see the weakness of the Queen of Dark. After all, at the end of the chaos in Snow Country, flaming fire showed the strength that was infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm. With such strength, if she were at the peak of flaming fire, not to mention dozens of seconds, in a few breaths, Milos and the superior of the half-step invincible realm with the code name, Steel Bone, who was good at defense, would be seriously injured. Whether they could survive depended on luck. But in this battle, although Milos and Steel Bone were injured, they basically escaped unscathed. The fact that the Queen of Dark was not in good condition had become a fact in the eyes of other superpowers. Therefore, the Jianghu family of South America and the Holy Land tacitly mobilized part of the forces in the northern part of the European continent and put this force into the decisive battle in Beihai. Only a small part of the force was left in the hinterland of the Dark Knights to restrain flaming fire. Among them, Milos and Steel Bones were the leaders. The Queen of Darkness might not have a good impression of Dong Huang, but she was undoubtedly more annoyed by what the Sanctuary and the Jianghu family of South America did. This also meant that in the eyes of the two superpowers, her value was equivalent to two top experts of the half-step invincible realm when she was not in her peak state. How could the proud and arrogant Queen of Darkness, who had always been by Qin Weibai's side, stand this? However, he could only suppress this anger in his heart for the time being and silently wait for the opportunity to get back at him. The assassin's gift made the Queen feel much more comfortable. She sat quietly on the dark seat and waited until her breathing had completely stabilized before she slowly waved her hand. A faintly discernible wind appeared in the grand hall. With a faint sound, the door of the dark hall slowly closed in silence. The Queen pressed a button under the bronze table in front of her. The long table moved to the left. Light shone from the ground. In front of the Queen, a long passage that could allow one person to pass through appeared. The Queen walked down in silence. The Dark Hall was the symbolic building of the Dark Knights. It was the palace of Raphael, the commander of the Dark Knights. But in fact, the underground area was the place where the Queen and Raphael lived daily. The orange light covered the long and dark corridor. The Queen, who was dressed in a rose-colored dress, walked quietly. The soft light completely showed her exquisite figure. She seemed to be affected by the person she admired the most. Her temperament was also calm and cold. But even after 2 years, there was still a touch of helplessness and loneliness in the depths of her eyes that she couldn't adapt to. At the end of the corridor was a metal gate. The queen entered the password and verified her fingerprint. As the gate opened, what appeared in front of her was not a base full of cold mechanical style, but a living room decorated with warm and comfortable colors: sofa, coffee table, TV, kitchen, dining room, and bedroom. This was her and Raphael's home. She was willing to stay here, but she still felt a little regretful. The slight sound in the kitchen kept ringing. Opposite the leather sofa, the wide TV was on. As the top bigwigs of the European continent and the only couple in the invincible realm, the TV in their home was not playing any European news, nor was it a speech by a core politician. Instead, it was the stunning cartoon Tom and Jerry. The queen sat on the sofa and watched it quietly, her eyes in a trance. In fact, she didn't like watching cartoons very much, but this was her boss's favorite TV program. Every time she was tired or before making an important decision, she liked to watch it quietly for a while to relax herself. Over time, Flaming Fire had gradually gotten used to this feeling. Xianxia, I made Zhongzhou cuisine today. I'm not very familiar with it, but it tastes good. Shall we try it? In some hearty laughter, the kitchen door was opened. Raphael, who looked younger than his actual age, walked out of the kitchen. His voice was warm and soft. He hadn't changed much from more than 2 years ago, but his handsome Eurasian face looked very pale and his breath was weak. But it seemed that because the queen was with him, he was in a good state of mind. The queen glanced at him and replied softly, the current Dark Queen. The former Flaming Fire. An expert who was close to the peak of the invincible realm. Few people in the dark world knew her real name. Even few of the 12 super masters of the Samsara Palace knew her real name. They only knew that she was from East Island. After following Qin Weibai, she had been called Flaming Fire. Gradually, Flaming Fire seemed to have become her real name instead of a code name. The queen herself was not even used to her real name, but only Raphael insisted on calling her that. He once jokingly said that only when he called her name could he be sure that she was his woman, not an invincible realm expert who was more powerful than him. The queen had a very nice name, but few people knew it. Wuxia Xianxia. This surname used to have a glorious history in the martial arts of East Island, but now, it had become unimportant to the queen. The assassins contacted me. Wuxia Xianxia walked into the dining room and sat down. It seemed that he spoke casually. Raphael's movements paused slightly, and then he nodded thoughtfully. The small force set up by Jiu? I've been paying attention to it in the past 2 years. Their organization is not big, and it doesn't involve a wide range of people. But the structure is very reasonable, and the quality of the personnel is not bad. At least in terms of setting up the assassins, Jiu was very clear-headed at that time. He's clear-headed once in a while, but unfortunately, he's still an idiot. Wuxia Xianxia was a little disdainful. Raphael smiled and said softly, "Why did they contact you?" "To join me." She lowered her head and took a sip of soup. Then she said calmly, "I agreed to become a peripheral force of the Dark Knights." Not bad. Raphael smiled and picked up her favorite mushrooms with his chopsticks. Even in the European continent, because of Wuxia Xianxia, they ate Chinese food most of the time, but Raphael rarely cooked in person. They're very useful. Wuxia Xianxia raised her head and looked at Raphael seriously. Her eyes were clear and pure. I plan to take action in the next few days and directly sweep out the power of the Jianghu family of South America and the Holy Land. But the assassins took action first. They killed Milos as a sign of allegiance. And Jiu has been cooperating with the Jianghu family of South America and the Holy Land before. The assassins must know this information very well. The assassins said that they can participate in the decisive battle in Beihai, but I plan to keep them in the European continent. Although the assassins' overall strength is not strong, staying here can make up for the power of the Dark Knights to a great extent. Even if they can't complete the cleanup, they will definitely cause great losses to the Holy Land and the Jiang family of South America. These forces have completely gone crazy for Beihai, and the strength they have deployed in various places has reached the limit. Such a fragile balance can be broken by the assassins. So, she lowered her head to eat and said softly, for the time being, with the assassins' participation, even if I'm not here, there will be no power in the European continent that can threaten the Dark Knights for the time being. Raphael looked at her quietly. So you're going to Beihai? Wuxia Xianxia was slightly stunned, and her eyes were complicated. She was silent for a long time before she said softly, his state may not be as invincible as he shows. The decisive battle in Beihai is very critical and sensitive. She bit her lip. I didn't continue to be the flaming fire of Emperor Dong's palace. Now, I can't just watch him die and ignore it. If even someone like Dong Wang could fall, then how useful can you be? You haven't recovered from your injury. Raphael shook his head. I found a way to temporarily suppress the injury. Wuxia Xianxia said softly. In fact, the speculation of the outside world was not wrong, but it was not completely correct. She was indeed injured. But the injury she suffered in Mormons 2 years ago was not as serious as the outside world had speculated. Because her injury in Mormons had been fully recovered about a year ago. It was at that time that she officially took over the Dark Knights and became the Queen of Darkness. Her current injury was a new one, a new injury caused by herself. Half a year ago, Flaming Fire forced a breakthrough and wanted to officially enter the peak of the invincible realm. But she failed at the most critical moment. This breakthrough brought her closer to the real peak of the invincible realm. But the forced breakthrough still caused a serious burden on her body. So in the conflict some time ago, she couldn't even do anything to the 2 half-step invincible realm experts. But now, she had found a way to keep herself in the peak state for the time being. Raphael sighed softly. Are you angry? Wuxia Xianxia smiled. No, I'm just a little worried. Raphael shook his head. How can the decisive battle in Beihai be so simple? It's okay. Wuxia Xianxia said softly, in my peak state, no matter what, I can at least protect myself. I'm afraid you'll be stupid. Raphael shook his head and put a black ring in Wuxia Xianxia's hand. It can barely be used once. He said slowly. Wuxia Xianxia frowned and looked at the ring in her hand. This was the murderous weapon of the Dark Knights. Dark Saint Spear. It had been less than 3 years since the chaos in Snow Country. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for the Dark Saint Spear to be fired again. However, if the state of the murderous weapon was not taken into account, it could be used once. But after using it, the Dark Saint Spear would basically be in a half-useless state. Forcibly stimulating the energy of the murderous weapon was equivalent to directly hurting the core of the murderous weapon. It could be foreseen that once the Dark Saint Spear was fired in the decisive battle in Beihai, the gunshots of the Dark Saint Spear would not be heard again in the Dark World for at least a few decades. Decades, thinking of the consequences, Wuxia Xianxia was a little annoyed. It doesn't matter. Raphael laughed. Even if the Dark Saint Spear is crippled, there's nothing to feel sorry about. When the time comes, we can just hand it over to Dong Wang. It can make Wuqing more powerful. Moreover, with our friendship, I believe that the compensation he gives will be generous enough to make up for the loss of the Dark Saint Spear. He won't come to me. In fact, the Dark Saint Spear is a deterrent, but it can't control everything. If I'm in a better state, I want to go with you. Raphael shook his head with a wry smile. Wuxia Xianxia lowered her head and looked at the ring in her hand. After a long time, she put away the ring and said softly, when I come back, we'll get married. Raphael was slightly stunned and then laughed. I've been waiting for this day and this sentence for too long. A few years ago, Wuxia Xianxia had promised him that after they married, she would give birth to a child for him. Raphael touched his hair with some emotion and sighed. If you had said that a few years later, would have almost become the child's grandfather. Wuxia Xianxia blushed slightly and glared at him. Flaming Fire was 35 years old this year, while Raphael was 47 years old. In terms of age, Raphael, who was 12 years older than Wuxia Xianxia, really couldn't afford to wait. Wuxia Xianxia combed her hair and said softly, "Wait for me to come back." After the destruction of the Samsara palace, she did not stay in Emperor Dong's palace. Even in the 2 years since she came to the Dark Nights, she had never contacted Emperor Dong's palace. But in any case, she couldn't just watch Li Tianlan be in danger and do nothing. During the time when she was delayed in the northern part of the European continent, she had been studying ways to suppress her injury. Originally, she had planned to forcibly suppress her injury and directly kill the forces of the Jianghu family of South America and the Holy Land here. Then, she would let the Dark Nights shrink. She would go to Beihai and come back quickly. But now with the addition of the assassin, everything became very simple. She had to go to Beihai. A large part of the reason was because of the friendship between her and Qin Weibai, but also because of Li Tianlan. Wuxia Xianxia raised her hand. An extremely illusory sword light appeared on her fingertips. Real and illusory. Day and night. The martial arts of the chosen one. In fact, she was also qualified to be called saint. In terms of strength, she was even more qualified than saint. Because like the current saint, she could become a superior of the invincible realm because she also learned Dongqing Huangtu's kendo. She needed Li Tianlan's guidance when she was only a step away from the peak of the invincible realm. Chapter 966. Yunguang was the nearest county to the capital of Beijiang and also one of the largest encampments of the Beijiang army. Considering the environment of Beijiang, Yunguang was developing well. Besides paying attention to the stability of the situation in Beijiang, Jiang Shan also paid close attention to the economic development. Yunguang was a county that he paid close attention to. In the meeting held in Yuzhou 2 years ago, Jiang Shan personally negotiated an investment with the Hong family, which was also from the northwest. The scale of tens of billions was neither too big nor too small. However, for Yunguang, the effect of this investment was immediate. In the past 2 years, Yunguang had been developing very fast. If there was no accident, Yunguang would be officially connected with the capital city of Beijiang in 2 years. By then, Yunguang County would naturally become Yunguang District. A black car with an ordinary license plate was slowly driving at the junction of Yunguang and the capital city. Li Huaqing looked at the scene outside the window calmly. The temperature in Beijiang was not high, and it was extremely cold in winter. It was quiet outside the window. Only pieces of simple houses flashed in Li Huaqing's sight occasionally. "President, we are still making statistics. After this event, about 60,000 people will choose to settle down in Beijiang. Of course, this is not the final number. Beijiang will solve the problem of household registration for them. By then, I hope the police department can give some support to Beijiang. We will try our best to solve the supporting policies for their families. Of course, it will be better if the parliament can help." The chief lawyer of the parliament, Thomas, was driving. Jiang Shan and Li Huaqing were sitting in the back row. Following Li Huaqing's sight, Jiang Shan's steady voice sounded, "Our preliminary plan is to build a town between Yunguang and the capital city. Well, not from scratch, but from the surrounding villages and the existing towns. The new town will be used to arrange the families who are willing to settle down here. If the town is developed smoothly, it can be connected with the capital city. In this way, the area of the capital city will be expanded by about 1/3, and Yunguang will also get better development opportunities. I've already held a meeting with the municipal government. They are relatively well off now, so they can carry out the merger and construction. The merger with Yunguang is the highlight of the work of the capital city in the next year. The newly established town will also become the core area of the capital city and Yunguang. There are many development opportunities and job opportunities here. Meanwhile, it can also solve the work problems of many families. If everything goes well, by next summer at the latest, this area will be completely connected to the capital, and the family members will be able to completely settle down here." Li Huaqing's expression was calm as he listened quietly. When Jiang Shan finished, he nodded and said, "Not bad." Li Huaqing arrived at Huading not long ago. This operation was very secretive. Beijiang did not publicize it. Only Jiang Shan came to pick him up in person. After getting off the plane and in the car, Li Huaqing directly asked to come here to have a look. Jiang Shan agreed without hesitation. Right now, only a small portion of the family members are living in simple houses. Most of them are concentrated in the barracks of the northern frontier military region. After all, it's more convenient over there. The logistics work hasn't been delayed, and there's still a good guarantee in terms of supplies. Li Huaqing nodded but still didn't speak. Their car had just driven over from the camp, so he naturally saw the current state of the family members. Jiang Shan also fell silent and didn't say anything. The atmosphere in the car was so oppressive that it almost froze. Ma Si pretended to be calm as she drove. Her palms were sweaty because she gripped the steering wheel too hard. At this moment, it was completely nonsense to say that he was not nervous. From the beginning, he didn't want Li Huaqing to come to Beijiang. In his opinion, this was completely risking himself. Jiang Shan's position was unclear. If he really committed treason, the consequences of Li Huaqing's trip would be really unpredictable. From the worst perspective, if Jiang Shan was really crazy enough to dare to attack Li Huaqing, then it would be almost impossible for Li Huaqing to leave Beijiang. As for the consequences, no matter what the consequences were for Jiang Shan, it had already happened. 4 people, even if all the Jiang family members were killed, it had little to do with him. Li Huaqing glanced at Ma Si intentionally or unintentionally, then turned his head, looked out of the window calmly, and said slowly, "Tell me what you think of the Beijiang army." Jiang Shan's eyebrows slightly trembled in an instant. Only those who knew him very well could see his movement. This was a sign that he was completely focused. For him, Li Huaqing's words were basically equivalent to a formal negotiation. The Beijiang army, he subconsciously sat up straight. After nearly half a minute of silence, he slowly said, "The overall strength of the army is now very serious. The main problem is the people's hearts. Huang Tong has gone too far this time, and the chaos a few days ago has also caused great harm to many people's hearts. Of course, His Majesty's handling is very good. If he hadn't urgently executed those high-level officials, I'm afraid things would have developed to the point where no one could clean them up, and even brewed into a huge and tragic social problem. It's just that His Majesty Dong Huang is too decisive. The Beijiang army is now in a state of no high-level officials, and it's a mess inside. The only thing that can be maintained is the logistics. The work of rebuilding the army is very difficult. I plan to promote high-level officials from within the existing army. At least, no matter what, we should first stabilize the internal affairs of the army. At this time, the working ability can even be put aside, but those positions must be filled. You can rest assured about this, President. I'll focus part of my energy on the Beijiang army and keep an eye on them. After the internal affairs are stabilized, we also have to consider the problem of soldiers. The loss this time is not only the dead, but also a large number of people are ready to leave the army. The army must improve a series of benefits within the army, and then recruit soldiers from the outside world. The financial resources of Beijiang are limited. I've thought about it before, and the scale of the Beijiang army can't be too large. Now, I plan to recruit 150,000 to 200,000 soldiers from the outside world. Of course, these are all recruits, and it will take some time for them to have combat effectiveness, and 150,000 to 200,000? Li Huaqing directly interrupted Jiang Shan's words. Ma Si quickly glanced at Jiang Shan through the rearview mirror, as if she was looking at a madman. The Beijiang army was not a large-scale army in Zhongzhou state, let alone compared with the Border Control Corps. Even in its heyday, its total scale was less than 200,000, or even 150,000. Jiang Shan needed 200,000 soldiers for a single recruitment. This also meant that there were nearly 300,000 soldiers in the entire Beijiang at once, including the soldiers who stayed behind. 300,000, what did he want to do? The most important thing was that he told the plan without reservation. Jiang Shan looked at Li Huaqing and calmly said, This time, he simply omitted the previous number and nodded, saying, 200,000. You really have a good appetite. Li Huaqing smiled. His smile was calm and indifferent, but it carried a touch of coldness and sharpness that was hard to fathom. If the northern frontier recruited 200,000 soldiers, then there are at least 300,000 soldiers here. Tell me, what do you plan to do with these 300,000 soldiers? Who are they going to fight against? Jiang Shan took a deep breath and said calmly, These 300,000 soldiers are the power that I think can stabilize the situation in Beijiang. No matter now or in the future, their only responsibility is to protect Zhongzhou state. To protect Beijiang. Li Huaqing looked at him for a long time. You're much more clear-headed than I thought. He smiled faintly. I thought you would only say to protect Beijiang, or put Beijiang before Zhongzhou state. If that's the case, then there's no need for us to talk, right? Jiang Shan also showed a smile. After all, Li Huaqing was the commander. Beijiang was the Beijiang of Zhongzhou state. If he had just answered that he would protect Beijiang instead of Zhongzhou state, or that he would protect Beijiang first and then Zhongzhou state, Li Huaqing might not have said anything. But after he went back, the entire Beijiang would be in a desperate situation. Jiang Shan did not want to commit treason, and he had never thought about it. So he would figure out the seemingly meaningless but actually the most important primary and secondary. Li Huaqing's smile remained unchanged and he did not comment. I have a question. Jiang Shan suddenly said. Go ahead. Li Huaqing's voice was calm. How many people know that the president is coming to Beijiang? Jiang Shan's voice was a little playful. Not many. Li Huaqing said with a smile, Minister Dongqing, Deputy Minister Yi, and Minister Zhou, only these people know. Dongqing Wudi, Yi Dongqing, and Zhou Yunhai. The three of them represented three different groups. The Prince group did not know, nor did the Special Warfare group. The president is very thoughtful. Jiang Shan said softly. He knew very well how important the three people in the know were. Once something happened to Li Huaqing in Beijiang, Dongqing Wudi could make the decision. Countless artillery fire would destroy everything of the Jiang family in an instant. In the face of the overall strength of a country, especially the overall strength of a super overlord like Zhongzhou state, nothing could survive the artillery fire. This was the most powerful warning. At present, I'm not disappointed in Beijiang, nor in you. Jiang Shan, I'm here today to give you a chance, and also the last chance for Beijiang. I'm waiting for your answer as to where you and Beijiang should go. The vehicle approached the downtown area. Ma Si changed the direction under the navigation and drove to the villa of the Jiang family in the suburbs. Tell me, who's behind you? Li Huaqing's voice was steady and dignified. I still say the same thing. Jiang Shan said slowly, the Jiang family has never turned to any force, let alone to the so-called foreign force. We only have ourselves. His voice was serious and serious. President, you'll see the answer. A satisfactory answer. I can guarantee that your trip to Beijiang today is absolutely worthwhile. Li Huaqing laughed. The black car slowly drove into the villa area and stopped in front of a villa in the central area. A figure shrouded in starlight and clouds was already standing there quietly. Li Huaqing couldn't see his face, but he could clearly feel the bright smile on the other side. Jiang Shan got out of the car first and opened the door for Li Huaqing instead of Ma Si. The figure at the door of the villa walked over steadily. Li Huaqing got out of the car and looked at the warm starlight and clouds in front of him, frowning slightly. If it's the confidence and strength of the Jiang family, Jiang Shan looked at the figure standing in front of Li Huaqing, who seemed to be composed of countless halos, and laughed. He is the confidence and strength of the Jiang family. The starlight was dim. The clouds surged. The soft light swayed slightly in front of Li Huaqing, getting fainter and fainter. Li Huaqing's eyes became more and more astonished, and his eyes became bigger and bigger. A familiar, extremely young face appeared in front of him and Ma Si. The starlight and clouds completely disappeared. His smile was bright. "Hello, Mr. President, I'm Jiang Shanyu." After a pause, he said with a smile, "You can also call me Your Majesty." Chapter 967. Direct, obvious, and honest. Before coming here, Li Huaqing had imagined many scenarios. He didn't completely believe that Jiang Shan hadn't turned to any forces, so even on the way, he was still wondering who he would meet here. Jiang Shan could invite him to Beijiang for a secret inspection. Naturally, it was not to show off, and he did not have the guts. If the other party wanted to assassinate the president, it was even more impossible. Therefore, compared to Ma Si's worries, Li Huaqing was more curious. He was very sure that since Jiang Shan had invited him to Beijiang, he would definitely be able to see something and meet someone. But he didn't know who he would meet. He was fully prepared and felt that it wouldn't be strange to see anyone. If it weren't for the foreign forces, he might have met Chen Fangqing, Gu Xingyun, or even Zhou Yunhai or Li Tianlan. If he exaggerated a little more, even if he saw Wang Tianzong here, he would feel that it was understandable. But he didn't. No one. Li Huaqing had never thought that he would see Jiang Shanyu here. In other words, he didn't expect to see Jiang Shanyu, who called himself His Majesty, here. Was this the confidence of the Jiang family? Li Huaqing stood in front of the car and did not speak for a long time. Countless intense emotions surged wildly in his heart. Shock, astonishment, disbelief, and finally, they turned into some kind of relief. Many of the things he couldn't figure out before seemed to have an explanation. For example, Jiang Shanyu had made continuous breakthroughs overnight. For example, he suddenly turned against Kunlun City. But as some things were explained, more doubts arose. His thoughts kept fluctuating. Li Huaqing was still calm on the surface. He looked at Jiang Shanyu with deep eyes, with obvious majesty and oppression. Jiang Shanyu looked at Li Huaqing with a smile, neither backing down nor dodging. "Your Majesty," after a long time, Li Huaqing slowly repeated this phrase. The Sword Emperor of Beihai, the East Emperor of Tiannan, and Jiang Shanyu in front of him. The word, His Majesty, had never been bestowed upon so many people in any era. At least in the past few hundred years, there were only two forces that could have the Emperor of the Dark World. One was the Wang family of Beihai. The other was the Li family. Li Huaqing took a deep breath and asked, "Was it you who challenged Li Tianlan in Tiannan last night?" "It's me." Jiang Shanyu nodded without hiding anything. "What's the reason?" Li Huaqing asked in a deep voice. "There are too many reasons." Jiang Shanyu said blandly, "To put it bluntly, he is not my friend, so he can only be my enemy." In the cold air, his smile was as bright as the sun. "President, please come in, we can have a good chat today. I'll accompany Deputy Ma for a walk. There are a lot of things to deal with in the northern borderline. I'll communicate with Deputy Ma about a lot of things, and Deputy Ma will relay them to you later." Jiang Shan looked at Li Huaqing and suddenly said with a smile. Ma Si finally came back to her senses. Her expression changed, and she wanted to say something but stopped. Jiang Shanyu was the emperor. He was now the third majesty of the Dark World. This identity represented too many things. To be honest, Ma Si didn't want to hear what Li Huaqing would talk to the president at all, but he was worried about Li Huaqing's safety. He stood there, hesitating. "All right." Li Huaqing took a deep look at Jiang Shan and responded simply. From Jiang Shan's attitude, Li Huaqing could be sure of one thing. In today's Jiang family, Jiang Shan had given most of the power to his son. When he didn't know Jiang Shanyu's identity behind the scenes, who would have thought that he would come to northern borderline to talk to the Jiang family and talk to Jiang Shanyu instead of Jiang Shan? Jiang Shanyu led the way in front, and Li Huaqing walked into the villa unhurriedly. The door was closed. It was quiet. The faint fragrance of tea floated gently in the hall. Li Huaqing sat on the sofa with a calm expression and looked at Jiang Shanyu. "It said that this is your favorite Longjing." Jiang Shangyu smiled and poured a cup of tea for Li Huaqing. The water in northern borderline is clear and sweet. The taste of this tea should be better than the one you drink in Jianghu state. Li Huaqing took the teacup and put it in front of him. He looked at Jiang Shangyu thoughtfully. You ask, and I'll answer. Jiang Shangyu calmly changed the honorific to a simple, you. Li Huaqing wasn't surprised by his attitude, but it was obvious that he still didn't understand what he saw. He unconsciously picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. After a long time, he slowly asked, how did you do it? Jiang Shangyu was a little confused. I've specially learned some information about martial arts. How did you achieve this kind of strength? It's almost certain that although you're a few years older than Li Tianlan, your body shouldn't be able to withstand the power of the invincible realm at all. But your attack in Tiannan has proved that you have the strength beyond the peak of the invincible realm. How did you do it? Is it important? Jiang Shangyu said casually, my state is a little special. You can even understand that I haven't entered the invincible realm yet. I can only exert the power beyond the peak of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan can do this, and I'm no worse than anyone else. Why can't I do it? If you have this kind of strength, why has the Jiang family been in a bad situation all these years? Li Huaqing shook his head subconsciously. It's not easy for me to get to this point. It wasn't until recently that I had enough strength and bargaining chips. Li Huaqing's voice became calmer and calmer. He said calmly, let's talk about the bargaining chips in your hand. The most obvious one is wealth. Jiang Shangyu said calmly, although the Jiang family doesn't have many industries at present, we are not short of money at the critical moment. It can be seen from the pension this time. Over the years, the Jiang family can get tens or even hundreds of times of every investment. You may not believe it, but if we compare the investment income of the Jiang family with the superficial income of the Flourishing Age Fund, our income rate is higher than that of the Flourishing Age Fund. It's just that we don't have much capital, so we can't reach the scale of the Flourishing Age Fund. The superficial income of the Flourishing Age Fund? Li Huaqing subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Don't doubt my words. After all, only the enemy will rack his brains to understand the enemy. According to my understanding, what the Flourishing Age Fund shows now is definitely not their complete scale. Although the Samsara Palace was destroyed, the main body of the Samsara Palace didn't suffer much damage. Their main body should be the Flourishing Age Fund. What the Flourishing Age Fund has exposed now is probably only 1/3 of their total scale, no more than half at most. Jiang Shangyu said calmly. What about you? Li Huaqing asked, how much have you exposed? How much have you hidden? So far, I haven't exposed anything. Jiang Shangyu said with a smile, but in front of the president, I'm willing to be honest for once. He opened the drawer and took out a folder that was stuffed full. The current industry situation of the Jiang family is here. In fact, my father is right. The Jiang family has never betrayed Jianghu state from beginning to end. You said that we turned to foreign forces, East Island, the Jiang family of South America, the Holy Land, any force. This is not accurate. Jiang Shangyu said calmly, to be precise, these foreign forces turned to me. And today, Jiang Shangyu stared into Li Huaqing's eyes and said word by word, with all the bargaining chips of our Jiang family, we plan to turn to you. Chapter 968. The so-called heartbeat was an irresistible feeling. It was like staying at home and suddenly someone knocked on your door with a lot of money. It was like walking on the street and suddenly there were countless beautiful girls who wanted to be your girlfriend. It was like, unable to resist. Even if he knew there would be a trap. Li Huaqing felt the same way. The Jiang family wanted to take all its chips to the academics. Even if Li Huaqing was a fool, he knew what this meant. As a supergroup that occupied the president's position, the academics was not strong most of the time compared with the Southeast group and the Prince group. The reason why the academics could get to where they were today was largely because of Li Huaqing's wisdom. Before Li Huaqing became a director of Jianghu State, although the academics was also one of the 6, its overall scale was even less than that of the North Group. It was a miracle that he could become the president of Jianghu state. It had a short development time, no foundation, no strong connections, no support from the top class, and no experts. This was the current situation of the academics. In recent years, the academics had developed rapidly and could vaguely compare with the Southeast Group and the Prince Group. Especially in the game of the past 2 years, as the Southeast Group and the Giant Group reshuffled, the academics had gained a lot of benefits from it. But the main reason for all this was that Li Huaqing was the president. If he were to step down from this position, the academics would not have the strength to replace his position. This also meant that the academics could at most have 1 or 2 directors, and the major groups would also join forces to squeeze the academics' living space in order to have a greater say. At that time, the strength of the entire academics would continue to be lost. In their current state, their scale might be only a little larger than the North Group. This was an unavoidable rule for any group. The rapid development after getting this position, and the suppression after losing this position. The 6 had all encountered such a situation. The only difference was that giants like the Southeast Group and the Prince Group, even if they were squeezed early, they could have more chips to balance the deal and would suffer less loss. The academics did not have such chips at present. Although Li Huaqing would still be re-elected this year, he had to plan for 5 years later. If Jiang Shanyu really took refuge with the academics, Li Huaqing's eyes became extremely deep in an instant. Jiang Shanyu pushed the folder in front of him toward Li Huaqing. Li Huaqing watched this scene quietly. For a moment, he felt that the folder was shining with a light that he couldn't look at directly. This is an obvious benefit. If Jiang Shanyu turned to the academics, what benefits would the academics get? The term rely on was very interesting. Not cooperation, not allies. Seek refuge. The Jiang family of South America, Knights Templars, and Jifeng Sword Raining School turned to Jiang Shanyu. Jiang Shanyu turned to the academics. This also meant that as long as the academics accepted Jiang Shanyu, it was equal to accepting the foreign network behind Jiang Shanyu. If these hidden pawns played well, they could often play a role that could not be ignored in the deadlock of international games. This meant that these forces would become the peripheral forces of Jianghu state. Strictly speaking, they were the peripheral forces of the academics. The Jiang family of South America was a superpower. Even if the divine sanctum left the sanctuary, it could still be considered a first-tier force like the Jifeng Sword Raining School. The Southeast Group had the Wang family of Beihai, whose network was all over the world. Now the academics only needed to accept Jiang Shanyu, and the disadvantages in this regard could be greatly made up. Secondly, it was the secret industry of the Jiang family. Li Huaqing didn't know how many secret industries the Jiang family had now, but these could be regarded as the overall strength of the academics. The importance of money to a group was self-evident. Behind every group, there was incomparably strong capital support. Otherwise, the Flourishing Age Fund would not have developed to this extent. And if they accepted Jiang Shanyu, the shortcoming of the academics without experts would immediately disappear. Jiang Shanyu, who called himself His Majesty, was even a super expert who could fight against Li Tianlan at this stage. The lack of their own experts had always been a pain in the heart of the academics. There was no need to say more about the Southeast Group. With the Wang family of Beihai, their experts had always stood at the peak of the dark world. The Prince Group also had the support of the Special Warfare Group. Even though the relationship between Gu Xingyun and them had gradually drifted apart over the years, the two sides always had the same general position. And before the appearance of Li Tianlan, Mount Shu could also be regarded as the power of the Prince Group. Even the Giant Group had Jade Pool behind it, which had produced several experts of the Invincible Realm. Only the academics could not produce decent experts. Without experts, it meant that it was difficult for the academics to intervene in the affairs of the special warfare system of Jianghu state. It also meant that they had given up the interests of the dark world. The Wang family of Beihai was stabilizing its internal affairs. Emperor Dong's palace was rooted in Tiannan. Gu Xingyun was now caught in the storm of treason, and his prestige was ruined. He had no time to take care of himself. At this time, if the academics could get a super expert who could rival Li Tianlan, Li Huaqing, who occupied the position of president, could make Jiang Shanyu the new god of war of Zhongzhou state after Gu Xingyun. And with the existence of Jiang Shanyu, the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace could be more balanced. This choice was undoubtedly much better than choosing Lin Yuxian. After all, even if Lin Yuxian's position was not mentioned, at least Zhongzhou state still needed to wait for Lin Yuxian's growth. Similarly, as the Jiang family turned to the academics, Beijiang would also become the academics' possession. As a senior member, Jiang Shan could also bring great help to the academics. All of them were benefits. The benefits that were enough to drive people crazy were completely placed in front of Li Huaqing with Jiang Shanyu's words. "Turn to me." Li Huaqing was silent for nearly 5 minutes before he said in a low voice, "I have never heard of His Majesty who turned to others." "That's because they don't need it." Jiang Shanyu said blandly, "The Wang family of Beihai has His Majesty. They are powerful and have everything they want. They don't need to turn to others at all. In terms of their foundation, they can cooperate with anyone at most. What they protect is their own country. Emperor Dong's palace also has His Majesty, but what is the prerequisite for Li Tianlan to become His Majesty? It is Li Honghe and the Dongqing clan who created Tiannan. It is his personal strength, the unreserved support of Samsara Palace, and the rich flourishing age fund. The Jiang family doesn't have these things. The so-called His Majesty can only be an empty shell. Except for my own combat capability, I have nothing that can compare with Emperor Dong's palace, let alone the Wang family of Beihai. If I want to survive, I can only turn to the academics." Li Huaqing leaned on the sofa, looked at Jiang Shanyu's expressionless face, and said slowly, "What do you want?" "I don't want anything." Jiang Shanyu laughed. "The Jiang family doesn't want to be a dog at others' feet, nor do we want to be cannon fodder." Li Huaqing gently tapped the armrest of the sofa and understood what Jiang Shanyu meant. They didn't want to be a dog or cannon fodder. He looked at this sentence from another angle. That was, Jiang Shanyu wanted to be on the same side as the academics. "Tell me about your plan." Li Huaqing was non-committal. "After the final battle in Beihai, Li Tianlan is very likely to die. My force will officially appear in Beijiang, and the Jiang family will officially appear in front of everyone. And Beijiang. In order to dispel other people's doubts, I hope the academics can nominate the new commander of the Beijiang Legion. In addition, I hope my father can still stay in Beijiang." The nomination of the commander of the Beijiang Legion by Li Huaqing was tantamount to announcing the close relationship between the Jiang family and the academics to the outside world. Letting Jiang Shan stay in Beijiang would undoubtedly further stabilize the situation. Li Huaqing took a deep look at Jiang Shanyu. The meaning of this sentence was equally clear. Beijiang could belong to Zhongzhou state or the academics, but it must belong to the Jiang family. "Okay." He nodded. Jiang Shanyu also nodded and didn't speak. This seemed to be his only request. It was almost no request. Li Huaqing took a deep breath, stood up, and took the initiative to reach out his hand. "Then, the academics welcome you, Your Majesty Jiang Shanyu." He agreed to join the Jiang family. From the beginning to the end, he did not mention the final battle in Beihai, nor did he mention the appointment with Li Tianlan 3 days later. "Thank you." Jiang Shanyu smiled and reached out his hand. "President, do you like the great mountains and rivers in Beijiang?" At 5:00 in the afternoon, Li Huaqing finally walked out of the villa. Jiang Shanyu personally sent him out of the villa. The two said goodbye in front of the door and shook hands vigorously. Ma Si, who had received the news 10 minutes in advance, drove the car over and opened the door for Li Huaqing. Li Huaqing got into the car, rolled down the window, and waved to Jiang Shan and Jiang Shanyu, who were standing quietly outside the window. Then, the car started and slowly headed for the airport. Except for him and Jiang Shanyu, no one knew what they had talked about in nearly 4 hours and what kind of deal they had reached. Ma Si wanted to say something but stopped several times. In the end, he didn't say anything. He actually wanted to know the content of the conversation between the president and Jiang Shanyu, but he was very clear that it was not necessarily a good thing for him to know these things. How was your chat with Jiang Shan? Li Huaqing seemed to be in a good mood. He glanced at Ma Si and asked with a smile. We had a good chat. We had a good chat. Ma Si laughed. Ha, Li Huaqing shook his head with a smile. What did you talk about? Ma Si drove the car, thought about it seriously, and said dumbly, in fact, we didn't talk about anything. This inconsistent answer was actually not contradictory at all. One was the chief secretary of Jianghu State, and the other was a senior member of Jianghu State. Both of them could be said to be wily old foxes. When they sat together, there would naturally be no awkward silence, but they were absolutely adept at playing the official tone. They had a good chat, but even if they had a good chat for a day, they could have a good chat without saying anything substantive. Li Huaqing shook his head with a smile and did not speak. Ma Si thought about it and suddenly said, however, Speaker Jiang Shan seems to be very concerned about the future of Beijiang and hopes that we can support it. In addition, he also mentioned some policies of Jianghu State in recent years and expressed a lot of opinions. Li Huaqing paused and subconsciously narrowed his eyes. A sharp light flashed in his eyes, then he nodded and said calmly, we should still support the northern borderline. The northern borderline army is a little sensitive now. After we go back, we need to choose a real capable general from within to be the northern borderline army's commander. Internally? Ma Si turned her head and looked at Li Huaqing in astonishment. There were two meanings in this. One was the internal of Jianghu State, and the other was the internal of the academics. If it was the former, Li Huaqing didn't need to tell him. This also meant that, would the academics take this extremely sensitive position? Li Huaqing nodded with a smile. You have been with me for many years. After the election, come down and have a look. Just come here and preside over the provincial government of Beijiang. Jiang Shan will support you. Ma Si's arm shook, and he couldn't come to his senses for a while. He had been with Li Huaqing for more than 10 years. At the level of governor, if he was demoted, he would at least be a border governor. People like him would generally have one or two better places to go. The best was naturally to be demoted to a remote and backward province and directly serve as a speaker. But such cases were rare. The second was to be demoted to various departments directly under Jianghu State as a minister or the first deputy minister. Now, Li Huaqing meant to let him be the governor of Beijiang. Although Beijiang was a little backward compared with Wuxia and Nanyue, it was the largest province in Jianghu State. The speaker had always been a member of parliament. There was no doubt that the governor of Beijiang was valuable. This could be said to be the best place for him. President, Ma Si's voice was a little hesitant. Li Huaqing glanced at him and nodded. From now on, the Jiang family is one of us. Ma Si took a deep breath subconsciously, and countless emotions kept rolling in his heart. The Jiang family was one of us. This news shocked him even more than Jiang Shanyu calling himself His Majesty. Don't feel wronged when you come to Beijiang. 5 years later, I will retire. At that time, Jiang Shanyu will probably be able to initially control Beijiang, and Jiang Shan will also let go of this place. At that time, the academics will fully support Jiang Shan to further become a director, and you will be the most powerful candidate for the speaker of Beijiang. Li Huaqing's voice was flat. Ma Si drove the car and was silent for a long time. If this was part of the deal, he pondered and gradually frowned. President, he whispered, the Jiang family's ambition seems to be a little too big. Man, Li Huaqing shook his head. Man's ambition is endless, but the most rational careerist always understands what he really needs. But there are always some people who have the ability, strength, means, and wisdom. But such people never really get what they want, so they will become very confused. They will instinctively want more, even want everything. He does have the ability, but he doesn't realize that his ability is great, but his ambition is greater, which is beyond his ability. Everyone will have such a situation, and the key lies in their own choice. For example, the original Wang family of Beihai, for hundreds of years, from the beginning to the present, the Wang family of Beihai has always wanted Beihai. Another example is the current Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan may not understand this at the beginning, but Samsara Palace and Li Honghe are sober enough, so they want Tiannan. The former is using the resources of Zhongzhou state to feed Beihai, and the latter is using the resources of Zhongzhou state to develop Tiannan, so they are cancer. They are ambitious, but they are also rational enough. Li Huaqing's voice contained countless sighs. What about Jiang Shangyu? He wants to use Beijiang to seek the whole Zhongzhou state, not to use Zhongzhou state to develop Beijiang. His choice seems to be similar to that of the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace, but in fact, it is completely different. He is a madman. He may think he is very sober, but in fact, he is crazy. I agree to let them join the academics and become one of us. But I can never let him hand over the future of Zhongzhou state and the academics to such a person. So I will show some attitude, but I can never give him too much support. The car drove slowly on the road. Li Huaqing looked at Beijiang outside the window and chuckled. The great mountains and rivers of Zhongzhou state. Do you deserve it? Chapter 969. The river was surging, and the wind and snow were howling. In the gloomy night, the lights of the city gradually lit up. The traffic was moving on the street. Looking down from a high place, the few pedestrians were like small black spots on the road. The wind and snow were swirling through the window. He stood in the luxury suite on the top floor of the hotel, and his eyes fell on the island in the center of the river. The exquisite island was still lit, but it was no longer brightly lit as it used to be. The lights flickered slightly in the darkness and the wind and snow, and some sparsely shone on the lake in the river. He looked at it silently and did not move for a long time. Such a Beihai, in the voice with a faint smile, Jianghu, the current patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, came over with 2 glasses of red wine. He handed one of them to him and sighed softly. Such a Beihai really deserves the title of the strongest force in the dark world. In terms of history, the history of the Jiang family of South America is longer than that of Beihai. To be honest, I used to be unconvinced of you. I always thought you were a group of nouveau riche praised by Zhongzhou state. You had the strongest sword emperor, the strongest murderous weapon, the freest system. All this was just good luck. In fact, at that time, I knew very well that the Jiang family of South America was not as good as you, but I was unconvinced. It was a very strange mentality, right? Jiang Guochu shook the wine glass in his hand with a smile and looked at the brightly lit city under his feet. This is my first time to Beihai. Such a Beihai is really prosperous. And desolate. Wang Xiaoyao held the glass and commented faintly. Jiang Guochu raised his eyebrows and seemed to be a little confused. When I was young, I learned the saber from an old man on that island. Wang Xiaoyao whispered. Jiang Guochu said thoughtfully, Heaven Saber DK, the strongest expert of the Wang family of Beihai in the past generations was the peak expert of swordsmanship, but Wang Xiaoyao was an anomaly. Since he was a child, he had been learning the saber. The Jiang family of South America naturally had information in this regard, but it was not very detailed. Yes. Wang Xiaoyao whispered, after the old master died in Li Tianlan's hands, the Kanglan Jiang family began to decline. Now. He shook his head and said, Beihai is indeed very prosperous, but the soul of Beihai is Mount Dibing, and the core is the 7 sword-holding families. According to the intelligence, my good nephew has moved all the important figures of the 7 sword-holding families out of Beihai province, and even some important figures of Mount Dibing are no longer in Beihai. Now those who are left are the combatants of Mount Dibing and the sword-holding family. This is undoubtedly the worst plan. This Beihai has lost most of its soul and core. It looks prosperous on the surface, but in fact, it is desolate. There was an elusive emotion in Wang Xiaoyao's voice. Do you mean that Wang Xianxiao's decision is stupid? Jiang Guochu laughed. Incorrigible stupidity. Wang Xiaoyao said flatly, it's simply superfluous. If North Sea is gone, what's the use of those who left North Sea? Such behavior, other than lowering our own morale, it won't have any positive effect. However, this is a good thing for us. Indeed. Jianghu took a sip of red wine and said with a smile, in all of our eyes, Wang Xingxiao is still too young. In the case of Sword Emperor's silence, you are the most suitable candidate to be the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. What a coincidence, I think so, too. Wang Xiaoyao raised his glass and gently touched Jianghu's glass. The two looked at each other and smiled. In an invisible tacit understanding, Wang Xiaoyao said slowly, I hope we can cooperate happily in the future. Although the alliance established by the Jiang family was still in a hidden state, the contact between several superpowers had become more and more frequent. If everything went well, after the final battle of Beihai, Wang Xiaoyao would become the new patriarch of Beihai. With the resources and foundation of Beihai, most of the superpowers needed them. The Jiang family of South America also urgently needed some of the technologies of the Wang family of Beihai in some fields. Similarly, Wang Xiaoyao also needed the superpowers. The alliance of the Jiang family did not have a clear superior and subordinate relationship, but was purely bound by interests. As long as the interests were large enough, the alliance between multiple parties was unbreakable. How is South America? Wang Xiaoyao asked suddenly, playing with the red wine glass in his hand. Still in a stalemate. Jiang Guochu shook his head. But Lin Fengting has appeared in South America. It's certain that he won't appear in the final battle of Beihai. After all, South America is my base camp. We're still sure that we can contain him there. Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a while, then took a deep breath and said, if Lin Fengting doesn't come, our pressure will be much less. That's true. But the European continent, Jiang Guochu gritted his teeth, and his face became a little gloomy. Milos, the top expert of the half-step invincible realm of the Jiang family of South America, who could even be said to have the combat capability of the invincible realm, died in the European continent. It could be said that it was the biggest loss of the Jiang family of South America since it participated in the final battle of Beihai. The chief executioner of the Jiang family of South America could almost be said to be Jiang Guochu's real right-hand man. Every time Jiang Guochu thought of it, he felt a pain from the bottom of his heart. With the death of Milos, the news that the assassin had turned to the Dark Knights had spread in the European continent. The Dark Knights were still very quiet, but the situation in the whole European continent had become more and more tense. They all knew the identity of the Dark Queen. So once the stalemate in the European continent was broken, the Dark Queen's position didn't need to be considered at all. She was also an expert close to the peak of the invincible realm. If she could spare some time to rush to Beihai, Emperor Dong's palace could be said to have an extremely powerful reinforcement out of thin air. Flaming fire, Wang Xiaoyao's eyes were a little complicated. He seemed to remember the days when he used to crazily pursue Qin Weibai but got no response. A trace of extremely powerless bitterness flashed in the depths of his eyes. Then he slowly shook his head. It's too late. Flaming fire can't get here in time. The Dark Knights suffered heavy losses in the chaos of Snow Country. The addition of an assassin won't have a big impact. If Flaming Fire wants to take action, she must act quickly and get rid of the power of the Jiang family of South America, the Holy Land, and Snow Country. She was originally injured. Even if she could take action, it would take time. But, she has no time. Jiang Guochu narrowed his eyes and nodded gently. 2 more days. 2 days later, it was the time for the battle between His Majesty and Li Tianlan. This battle was bound to attract the attention of the whole dark world. And 2 days later, it would also be the time when they officially provoked the final battle of Beihai. Chapter 970. No matter how turbulent the outside world was, the inside of Emperor Dong's palace was always calm and peaceful. Today's Emperor Dong's palace seemed to have an extremely stable and majestic aura, just like the Wang family of Beihai before. That kind of confidence quietly affected everyone in Emperor Dong's palace. The mysterious expert's challenge to Li Tianlan continued to ferment in the dark world. In just one day, it had attracted the close attention of countless forces in the dark world. Both the superpowers and the medium and large forces in the dark world were silently analyzing the possible results of this battle and nervously preparing for the upcoming drastic changes in the dark world. But inside Emperor Dong's palace, it was calm as if nothing had happened. The specific form of this calmness was that most of the higher-ups in Emperor Dong's palace were busy with their own affairs. Except for the initial shock and astonishment, Emperor Dong's palace quickly calmed down, as if everyone had absolute confidence in Li Tianlan. So far, no one had expressed any opinion about this battle. Not to mention worry, they didn't even mock the mysterious expert. This time, it had attracted the attention of the dark world, but inside the Emperor Dong's palace, it seemed to be completely ignored. As one of the most important and core higher-ups in Emperor Dong's palace, military counselor couldn't understand the current mentality of Emperor Dong's palace. His position was completely different from Saint's. When Samsara Palace existed, Saint was the main combat force of Samsara Palace, but the master of Samsara Palace regarded him as one of the most important supporting forces for Li Tianlan in the future. Therefore, Saint was not responsible for anything in Samsara Palace, only the necessary battles. Military counselor was a comprehensive talent who controlled most of the affairs of Samsara Palace. He controlled the wealth, resources, and intelligence of different channels of Samsara Palace. He was the general manager who managed most of the affairs of Samsara Palace. As for the future of Emperor Dong's palace, the master of Samsara Palace didn't arrange any specific position for him, which was equivalent to leaving him a way out. Military counselor had always been different from Saint. Saint was a top-notch combat talent. Because of his relationship with Samsara Palace, Li Tianlan could trust him completely and even give him the position of deputy palace master. But a management talent like military counselor was different, especially a management talent like military counselor who was similar to an overview of the overall situation. His position was too sensitive. The master of Samsara Palace could trust military counselor completely, but it didn't mean that Li Tianlan could trust him completely. Even if he could trust him, there was still the problem of whether he could be used conveniently. Therefore, in the original plan, when Samsara Palace was destroyed and Emperor Dong's palace rose, military counselor could withdraw from the core position of Emperor Dong's palace with a small part of the shares of the Flourishing Age Fund, and then slowly fade the traces of his existence. Of course, if Li Tianlan trusted him enough and he was willing to stay, he could continue to lead the Flourishing Age Fund. It all depended on Li Tianlan's attitude and military counselor's own choice. Military counselor had never known Dong Qinghuangtu. He knew of this person's existence, but he had no interest in understanding, learning, or using him for reference. His martial arts talent and age were not enough for him to enter the invincible realm. Half-step invincible realm was his limit. He didn't want to learn the martial arts and sword energy of the so-called chosen one, nor did he bother to think about how great the dynasty after Samsara Palace would be. All his thoughts were on the development of Samsara Palace, and all his loyalty was to the master of Samsara Palace. He didn't know Dong Qinghuangtu, which meant that he didn't know Li Tianlan. The scenery after the invincible realm was extremely strange to him. The strength after the peak of the invincible realm had become very vague to him. Therefore, when a mysterious expert who had surpassed the peak of the invincible realm personally delivered the letter of challenge to Li Tianlan, it was really hard for him to understand how the whole Emperor Dong's palace could completely ignore him. This kind of detached mentality, which regarded the heroes of the world as non-entities, made military counselor instinctively feel a little uneasy. He might not know much about the ultimate martial arts of this era, but at least he could know that Li Tianlan hadn't really set foot in that supreme realm. At most, he had broken through the peak of the invincible realm. Facing the challenge of a super expert in the same realm, the whole Emperor Dong's palace seemed to have underestimated the enemy. Was he arrogant? Was he arrogant? Military counselor hesitated for a day and finally found Saint on the evening of the second day after the letter of challenge was issued. He still didn't want to communicate with Li Tianlan directly about many things. He would avoid it if he could. It was the same to find Saint and ask him to help him convey his attitude. After returning to Emperor Dong's palace, Saint had been staying in his room. When military counselor opened the door, invisible sword energy was spreading in the room. The space kept shaking and twisting in front of military counselor, and finally formed a delicate balance. Saint, who was a little pale, was staring at the middle point of the space distortion. He frowned tightly, and his eyes were solemn and serious. Military counselor stood at the door and frowned, but he didn't want to leave. Military counselor glanced at him and gently flicked his fingers. The constantly spreading sword energy in the room slowly shrank. Then, the whole twisted space seemed to be slowly smoothed out by an invisible hand. Saint, who was a little pale, slowly exhaled. He picked up the water glass in front of him and drank some water. Then he asked casually, "What's wrong? You don't look right." Military counselor walked into the room, took out a cigarette and threw it to Saint. "Is your injury worse?" "No." Saint smiled, lit the cigarette, took a deep drag, and said slowly, "I'm a little exhausted. I'll be fine after a night's rest." Military counselor nodded, smoking absent-mindedly, and didn't speak for a while. "You came to me just to smoke? Afraid of being discovered by Xinyan?" Saint glanced at him and joked. "Xinyan follows His Majesty all the time. As her father, I have to put her in second place." Military counselor shook his head with a bitter smile. He hesitated and said slowly, "Did His Majesty go to the city hall today?" "He came back after lunch. Mayor Ning is very capable, and there's not much for His Majesty to worry about in the city hall." Military counselor said, "What about now?" "He should be talking to Du Hanin and Su Chu. They will secretly leave Beihai tonight and go to East Island. The new Nightmare Army has begun to gather people. If everything goes well, I'll set off tomorrow afternoon." Saint glanced at him. "Tomorrow afternoon? To East Island?" Military counselor frowned. Saint nodded. "Do you have a different opinion?" "The day after tomorrow, Jianghu will challenge His Majesty." "Are you going to East Island tomorrow?" Military counselor said in a deep voice. "Yeah." Saint smiled. Looking at military counselor's expression, he seemed to understand something. "There's nothing to worry about." "Why? Are you worried that His Majesty will lose? He's not really invincible yet." "Aren't you worried at all?" Military counselor took a deep breath and asked slowly. "He can do it." Saint said blandly, "His Majesty can't lose." In other words, Jianghu has no chance, no chance, no chance at all. By being ruthless? Military counselor smiled with a complicated expression. "No, by His Majesty himself." Military counselor seemed to think of something, and his eyes became a little strange. "To tell you the truth, I was a little worried before this noon. But after noon, I found how ridiculous my worries were. All of us don't understand His Majesty's power at all." "What do you mean?" Military counselor raised his eyebrows. "When His Majesty returned from the city hall this afternoon, Saint hesitated for a moment. He seemed to be a little embarrassed and didn't know how to describe it. "Well, we had a friendly match with His Majesty." "Spar? You?" Military counselor's voice sounded a little strange. "Me, Situtsanyua, Lin Yuxian, Li Beidian and Bai Yuming." Saint sounded a little annoyed. The five of them could be said to be the strongest fighting force in Emperor Dong's palace, except for Li Tianlan. 2 were in the invincible realm and 2 were in the half-step invincible realm. Li Beidian, who had the lowest realm, also had the strength of the half-step invincible realm. "It's not a tag team battle," Saint said hoarsely, 5 against 1. "What was the result?" The military counselor's voice became more and more strange. "The result?" Saint sounded like he was having a toothache. 1 minute and 30 seconds. "The 5 of us were defeated." The military counselor let out a long, "Oh." He was silent for a moment before he slowly said, "So, do you think the 5 of you can rival Jiang Shanyu? Is that why you're not worried about the outcome of the battle?" Of course not. Saint lowered his head and took a deep drag on his cigarette. His voice was in a trance, as if he was telling a nightmare. The key is that in the friendly match just now, His Majesty suppressed his strength to the thunder-shocking realm, not even the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. The 5 of us faced His Majesty of the thunder-shocking realm, and we were defeated in 1 minute and 30 seconds. Chapter 971. Military Counselor didn't speak for 5 or 6 minutes. Saint sat opposite him and finished smoking the cigarette in his hand. He put out the cigarette butt and looked at Military Counselor silently, without speaking. Thunder-shocking realm. 1 minute and 30 seconds. Complete defeat. These words were very common when they appeared alone, but together, they brought an indescribable horror. Military Counselor couldn't believe it. He even thought he had heard it wrong. Thunder-shocking realm? Military Counselor asked again, as if to confirm. Thunder-shocking realm. Saint nodded seriously. To be exact, this should be the state when His Majesty broke through to the thunder-shocking realm for the first time. His aura was unstable, and there was still the aura of the fire-flaming realm. But even so, we still lost. Military Counselor's pupils dilated slightly. He opened his eyes and subconsciously raised his tone. How is this possible? You have 2 invincible realm experts. Not to mention others, you and Situ Tsanyue are 2 invincible realm experts. If His Majesty suppresses his strength to the thunder-shocking realm, he can't even break your defense. How did you lose? The corner of Saint's mouth twitched fiercely. Although the voice in his heart told him again and again that it was not shameful to lose to Li Tianlan, he still felt a little shameful when he thought of the scene a few hours ago. Saint didn't think he had to be invincible in the world. It was not that he couldn't lose, nor that he couldn't afford to lose. But losing in that way really made him feel a little ashamed. The problem is defense. So you mean that your and Situ Tsanyue's defense didn't resist His Majesty's attack? Military Counselor seemed to have heard a joke and laughed. When did the defense level of the invincible realm become so bad? No matter how strong His Majesty is, he only has the power of the thunder-shocking realm. Strictly speaking, His Majesty, who just entered the thunder-shocking realm, has almost reached the level of the half-step invincible realm. Saint glanced at him discontentedly. But Situ Tsanyue and I joined hands, and Lin Yuxian and others assisted us. His Majesty did not break our defense, but it was precisely because he did not break our defense that we lost. Otherwise, even if we lost, it shouldn't be so ugly. What do you mean? Military Counselor frowned and felt a little confused. Saint picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. His eyes were a little dazed, and he muttered to himself, "Too fast." The corner of the military advisor's mouth twitched. He said helplessly, "Can't you be more specific?" There's no way to go into details. I don't know what to say either. Saint tried hard to think about the incredible fight not long ago. He spoke very slowly. Anyway, the moment His Majesty attacked, we subconsciously made a defensive move. After that, we no longer had the chance to attack. We kept defending, and after more than a minute, all of us used up our stamina and even reached a state of exhaustion. That was the end of the sparring session. Obviously, he didn't want to continue this topic and shook his head fiercely. We are not sure what the real perfect state of the Chosen One is. It was mentioned in the notes that the Palace Master gave me, but it was not clear. The time from Wang Tianzong's breakthrough to his termination was too short, so it was difficult to have a clear conclusion. Now, apart from Wang Tianzong, in terms of combat capability, His Majesty is undoubtedly the person closest to that level, and his physical state is too perfect. Whether it's strength or speed, relative to his physical strength, he has almost no flaws in all aspects, so there's no need to worry about Jiang Shanyu's challenge at all. I even think that if His Majesty goes all out, Jiang Shangyu won't even have a chance to resist. That's too exaggerated. Military advisor shook his head. I guess only Emperor Dong's palace is so optimistic in the whole dark world. After the news of Jiang Shangyu's challenge to His Majesty spread, in such a short time, more than 40 second-class forces in the Dark World have accepted the employment of the Jiang family of South America, Knights Templars, and East Island respectively, planning to directly participate in the final battle in Beihai. And this news was released a few hours ago. You should know what it means. The news of the final battle in Beihai didn't just appear in recent days. It had been brewing in the Dark World for a long time. It was only with the increasingly obvious actions of several superpowers that Beihai received more and more attention. Several superpowers had been secretly recruiting troops or hiring some other forces to go all out to invade Beihai. According to the information that military advisor had, before Jiang Shanyu challenged Li Tianlan, all the second-class forces hired by the superpowers added up. There were less than 20 of them. But since the challenge, more than 40 second-class forces were willing to join the final battle in Beihai. Jiang Shanyu's appearance undoubtedly greatly stimulated the confidence of many forces in the Dark World. This kind of employment at the level of the final battle often represented great benefits, and Jiang Shanyu's appearance also gave them the hope of victory. Many forces expressed their positions, which undoubtedly meant that they put their chips on the joint forces of Jiang Shanyu. In other words, they all agreed that Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace would fail in the final battle. Second-class forces in the Dark World. It didn't sound like much. The level of the superpowers didn't have a more authoritative confirmation, but there were some things that everyone in the Dark World recognized. For example, the Wang family of Beihai, the Jiang family of South America, the Shadow Throne, the Holy Land, and the Mecha Alliance and the Heroes Club that once existed. They had a long history and deep foundation. They had invincible realm experts, murderous weapons, and an unbreakable base camp as their foundation. Such forces were recognized as superpowers in the Dark World. The Purgatory of Heaven capital that first appeared in East Island more than 5 years ago and the current Emperor Dong's palace could barely be regarded as one of the superpowers. The two might not be traditional superpowers, but what they had in common was that the leaders of the two superpowers were extremely strong, and they were not afraid of the real superpowers. The former Samsara Palace, Kunlun City, Jifeng Sword Raining School, Wuji Palace, Sai City, Burning Legion. Such forces were recognized as first-class forces in the Dark World. They might not have enough foundation, a short history, a weak leader, and all kinds of shortcomings, but there would at least be one invincible realm expert in a first-class force. Because of this, the Assassin Association, which had only begun to develop in recent years, could also be regarded as a first-class force. Several superpowers and a few first-class forces formed the top class of the Dark World. After that were the second-class forces. The super-large mercenary corps, the large private armed forces with complex components, and the killer organizations whose business scope covered the world, could all be regarded as second-class forces and the backbone of the Dark World. This kind of force might not have top invincible realm experts, but there were always experts in the fire-flaming realm, the thunder-shocking realm, and even the half-step invincible realm. 40 second-class forces accepted the employment of the coalition led by Jiang Shanyu. If they were willing to do their best, it would be a huge force that no one could ignore. In the whole Dark World, there were not many second-class forces that could be recognized by everyone. 40 was almost the vast majority of them. Saint frowned slightly and kept silent for a long time. Do you still remember 2 years ago? His voice was a little low. Military counselor raised his eyebrows, glanced at him, and said nothing. At that time, the Samsara Palace judged most of the invincible realm experts in the whole Dark World. After the trial day, we ended Wang Tianzong and brought a new era. Saint smiled. What if we win this time? Most of the forces in the Dark World, he said softly, if we win this time, we will judge the whole Dark World. In the new era, there will inevitably be a new dynasty. I'm ready. Chapter 972. Legislation. Looking at Ning Qianqing sitting opposite him, Li Tianlan's tone was a little stunned. We've discussed it internally. Everyone has always thought that it's time. As if he had been prepared, Ning Qianqing took out a thick stack of documents from his bag and handed them to Li Tianlan. Take a look at these. If you have no objections, I will personally go to Yuzhou to communicate with Guo Wendian. Li Tianlan silently looked at the documents in Ning Qianqing's hand and then at his own palm. He held a spicy duck head in his palm. Without disposable gloves, his fingers were all stained with oil. He was silent for a while before asking in confusion, "What are you doing here today?" "Drinking." Ning Qianqing answered matter-of-factly. There were 7 or 8 exquisite side dishes in front of them, and a bottle of Maotai had been half empty. The scene in front of them was definitely not a report. When the two brothers were chatting, they talked about the future direction of Tiannan. On a whim, Ning Qianqing directly took out the documents that were strictly speaking not fully prepared from his bag. "Now that we've talked about it, you should also take a look. This is one of the most important tasks in Xianyuan City in the next 3 years." Li Tianlan got rid of the duck head in his hand, wiped his hands, took the documents and glanced at them. The dense small words on the documents made him dizzy, as if he had drunk too much. He shook his head and put the documents aside. "How many people are there in Xianyuan City now? Is it necessary to make laws at this time? I originally planned to wait until after the election, when everything would be settled and there would be more room for maneuver. But now it seems that we can do it a little earlier. The battle in North Sea is a key. After the battle, we can use your influence to promote the legislation in Xianyuan City." Ning Qianqing took a sip of wine and clicked his tongue. How can it be so easy to make laws? Councillor Guo Wendian of the National Assembly is one of the leaders of the Prince Group. It's not easy to get through him. This matter must have the support of the Assembly, at least the majority support. Xianyuan City needs our own laws. It seems easy to make laws, but the difficult part is to continuously revise and improve the laws after they appear. With repeated improvements, the legal system in Tiannan can slowly mature. This requires a process. Now it seems that there was indeed no need for Xianyuan City to pass laws in a hurry, but they had to prepare for a rainy day. By the time Xianyuan City and even the entire Tiannan City needs laws, our laws will be relatively mature. Otherwise, if we rush to legislate at that time, Tiannan will be in chaos for a period of time, and the development of the entire Emperor Dong's palace will be slowed down. Li Tianlan thought for a moment and looked at the information beside him. Which step are you ready to take now? The City Hall has reached a consensus. In addition, we've greeted some people in Jianghu State. We've sent invitations to the top judges, lawyers, scholars, and professors in Jianghu State, and the feedback is good. If Emperor Dong's palace can support it, the City Hall will set up a team in a short time. Qiuming will be in charge of the specific work, and I'll be in charge of the external affairs. From the very beginning, the system of Xianyuan City was essentially different from that of Jianghu State. There was no Speaker of Parliament here. The one with the highest power was the mayor. Below the mayor were the chief executive officer and the chief judge. The current chief judge of Xianyuan City, Lan Qiuming, was the person he personally asked for from the Jianghu State Police Department a year ago, and it was Zhou Yuanshan who strongly recommended him. It was Lan Qiuming's proposal that Xianyuan City prepared to legislate a few years earlier. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment. He picked up the information beside him and looked at it. He nodded and said, "It's ready. Let me know if there's anything I need to do." "Actually, there is." Ning Qianqing laughed. "I'll go to Yuzhou to set up a team and communicate with Guo Wendian. But I hope you can bring up the matter of Xianyuan City's legislation in the parliament. This matter must be high profile." "No problem." Li Tianlan nodded carelessly. "Well, there's one more thing." Ning Qianqing reached for the bag beside him again. Li Tianlan felt a headache and waved his hand. "Just say it." "I'm listening." He was very resistant to the information, especially the information of tens of millions of words. It was so dense that it made him dizzy no matter what. Ning Qianqing took out a pack of cigarettes from his bag and handed one to Li Tianlan. He threw the empty cigarette pack on the table into the trash can. "You also have to think of a way to deal with the Ministry of Education. The construction of Xianyuan City is progressing well, Although many places are just empty frames, the construction plan has been approved by the City Hall. We have enough funds. There will be more and more construction teams all over the country, which means the construction speed will be faster and faster. By about August next year, the transformation of the entire city should be preliminarily completed. As for the old city, I plan to set up a campus, including elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and universities. So we need a lot of talents in education. It's not going very well at present. I mean, the first university in Tiannan may not be the most famous key university in Zhongzhou State in the short term, but it must have a few top-level majors. Only in this way can we attract some talents and fresh blood. In the next few years, the focus of Xianyuan City will be on the two fields of legislation and education. In the Ministry of Education, the academics have a great influence. I guess you'll need to talk to Hua Xingyang this time, or directly communicate with the president. Okay. Li Tianlan nodded, raised his glass and clinked it with Ning Qianqing. From nothing to something, Li Tianlan drank up the wine in his glass and looked at Ning Qianqing with a smile. You've worked hard these 2 years. Not really. Ning Qianqing shook his head. There was a look on his face that Li Tianlan had almost never seen before. He was high-spirited and even full of lofty sentiments. It was a kind of restrained but extremely dazzling confidence, just like how Li Tianlan talked about martial arts. I like this kind of life. His smile was very calm. To change a city, to change a province in the future, and even to change a country in the future. To change the fate of countless people. Compared to martial arts, I prefer who I am now. From nothing to something, Tianlan, you don't know how great a sense of accomplishment I feel watching Xianyuan City change day by day. Our future is in our hands. He poured a glass of wine and raised it. Cheers, for the future. His cell phone rang. Li Tianlan drank up the wine in the glass, took out his phone and looked at the number. A smile appeared on his lips. He answered the phone and said, I have nothing to do. I'm drinking with Qianqing. His voice was low and soft. Where are you? On the other end of the phone, Qin Weibai's voice came with a smile. I've arrived in Yuzhou. I'm going to Nanyuan right away. Tianlan, can you pick me up later? Chapter 973. When she picked up the fashion magazine in front of her, Qin Weibai's face had a very satisfied and gentle smile. The soft light quietly fell on her, and her whole person seemed to have a touch of indescribable brilliance. Standing beside her, Horsewoman held a hot mobile phone, and her face was full of helplessness, as if she had been forced to eat dog food. She casually turned a page of the magazine, and Qin Weibai's lazy and cheerful voice rang out. Tianlan will pick us up in Nanyuan in a moment. He should arrive half an hour earlier than us. Horsewoman stood there without expression and said a word. Whether Qin Weibai was Qin Weibai or not, at least their habits were completely the same. Horsewoman knew very well that she didn't need to say anything at this time. Qin Weibai held her cheek with one hand, and her rosy lips sucked the juice straw in front of her. When she was in a trance, her eyes were full of smiles. No one knew what she was thinking of. They had long been tired of the feeling of being watched wherever they went, so now they quietly stayed in the private VVIP lounge of the airport. The classic cartoon, Tom and Jerry, was playing on the big screen on the wall. Qin Weibai's eyes fell on the screen, and she was in a daze for a long time. Then she let go of the straw and sighed softly. I have talked with Lin Chenglu. In the future, Emperor Dong's palace will be responsible for the fantasy project in Asia, and the transportation channels and trading channels will be controlled by us. In addition, he is willing to sell part of the shares of the 2 casinos in Haojiang to Emperor Dong's palace on the condition that they build a casino in Xianyuan City. In the future, you will negotiate with Lin Chenglu, and the details will be discussed with military counselor. Qin Weibai said softly. Horsewoman was stunned, and then she nodded and said, okay. As Qin Weibai became the patriarch of the Lin clan, Horsewoman came into contact with more and more people and things of the Lin clan. She was very familiar with the name Lin Changlu, but when it came to formal meetings, it seemed that she had only met him twice. Lin Changlu was the patriarch of the largest branch of the Lin clan in Asia, and he used to be one of the Li family's staunch allies. Since the Li family was destroyed more than 20 years ago, Lin Changlu's force had been a bit distant from the headquarters of the Lin clan. This time, he cooperated with Emperor Dong's palace because he saw the Li family rise again and wanted to build a relationship with Emperor Dong's palace. As expected of an old fox. In terms of seniority, Lin Changlu could be regarded as Lin Fengding's distant uncle. He was 70 years old this year, and his family headquarters were in Malaya. Relatively speaking, among the major branches of the Lin clan, his strength was not the strongest, at least not comparable to the branches of the Lin clan in Europe, but his foundation was the most stable. He was known as the Rubber King of Malaya and had different degrees of cooperation with the world's major consortiums. At the same time, he also ran more than 100 large-scale gambling in different countries in Asia. In addition, the signature project of Lin Changlu's family was the fantasy project that Qin Weibai had mentioned. Strictly speaking, fantasy was a kind of drug, but it was an extremely high-grade drug. Fantasy also contained a certain amount of opium, but it used hundreds of different drugs to offset the harm of opium to the human body. Fantasy could be made into cigarettes or the most primitive powder, which was high in purity and extremely difficult to imitate. It could be said to be the gospel for drug addicts. The cost of fantasy was about twice that of regular drugs, but the price was 10 times that of ordinary drugs. Although Lin Changlu had been strictly keeping the formula of fantasy a secret, he never refused to cooperate, and he was not stingy when distributing profits. Therefore, with fantasy alone, he had very close cooperation and good personal relations with the big drug lords all over the world. The Golden Triangle, the Silver Country, and Colombia could almost be regarded as his sphere of influence. Lin Changlu's family alone could eat more than 30% of the output of the major plantations every year. This time, Qin Weibai personally talked to Lin Changlu, which basically meant that Emperor Dong's palace had won the agency of fantasy project in Asia. The profits were still secondary. Emperor Dong's palace could mainly take advantage of this to reach out to the big drug lords and further stabilize its position in the dark world. This was what Qin Weibai valued most. Horsewoman looked down at her watch and whispered, "Boss, it's time to go. The plane will take off in 40 minutes. Qin Weibai seemed to be thinking about something. Hearing this, she frowned and subconsciously glanced at the time in front of her. Wait a little longer. Horsewoman subconsciously wanted to ask who Qin Weibai was waiting for, but before she could speak, the door of the private lounge was gently knocked on. Open the door. Qin Weibai's tone was calm. Horsewoman walked over and opened the door. A tall and burly bald man stood at the door. The aura all over his body was extremely fierce, and he seemed to be filled with an extremely violent power from head to toe. But the look in his eyes was extremely deep. Horsewoman frowned and suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. Rather than saying that the other party's eyes were deep, it would be better to say that they were dull and lifeless, like a puppet. Her eyes slowly contracted, and her voice was cold. Ghost Flame? She recognized the man. The man was not a nobody in Jianghu state or even in the dark world. Even if the dark world now had the power beyond the peak of the invincible realm, it was impossible for the peak of the thunder-shocking realm to be a nobody. Ghost Flame of Kunlun City. He was one of the few experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in Kunlun City, and he was close to the half-step invincible realm. The peak of the realm. In everyone's heart, in Gu Xingyun's, and even in Ghost Flame's own heart, he was the most loyal dog to Gu Xingyun. He was loyal and absolutely loyal. Why was he here? What did he want to do? Let him in. Qin Weibai's calm voice sounded behind Horsewoman. Horsewoman took a deep breath, turned sideways little by little, and then walked quickly to Qin Weibai, staring at Ghost Flame's every move. If it was the master of Samsara Palace, she didn't need to worry about anything at all. But Qin Weibai, who was beside her at this time, really didn't know martial arts. In terms of strength, Horsewoman didn't think she had much advantage over Ghost Flame. In this case, she couldn't help but be nervous. Ghost Flame's movements were a little stiff as he reached into his arms. Horsewoman's body instantly tightened. Ghost Flame's palm slowly reached out from his arms. He held a neatly folded envelope in his hand. Miss S. Letter. Ghostfire enunciated each word clearly. His voice sounded extremely strained, and his entire person looked incomparably strange. It was an indescribable stiffness. He was muddle-headed and ignorant, as if he were sleepwalking. This state, Horsewoman suddenly opened her eyes wide. She was familiar with this state, but also strange. She had never experienced it, but she had seen several people in this state. Hypnosis. There was no doubt that Ghostfire had been hypnotized in an extremely thorough way. Under such circumstances, he was completely a puppet of the hypnotized person. Everything he had seen and experienced, whether it was normal or abnormal, was normal in his mind at that moment. A hypnotized expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm? Horsewoman felt a little incredible. Qin Weibai reached out to take the envelope in Ghost Flame's hand and opened it. On the neat letter paper, there were countless names densely written in childish handwriting. They were all names. There was no introduction, only names. But for Qin Weibai, this was indeed the most critical information. She held the letter paper, lowered her head, and was silent for a long time. Ghost Flame, who looked a little stiff, left the lounge without saying a word. The door was slowly closed. Qin Weibai sighed softly. After a long time, she murmured, "What a terrible child." You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.